Humble woman got stuck in an elevator with a stranger, not knowing he was a CEO completely in love with her. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. A flicker of fluorescent light shivered against the polished steel walls, reflecting Caitlin's anxious face like a ghost in a mirror. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning. She had woken up before dawn, chosen her best blazer, rehearsed her answers for the upcoming interview, and left her cramped apartment with a sense of both hope and dread. Little did she know those efforts would be overshadowed by a single, humbling moment in an elevator. Inside the gleaming skyscraper, Caitlin slipped past the bustling reception area, murmured a polite greeting to the security guard, and pressed the sleek button that would bring the elevator to the lobby. The building was home to one of the city's most prestigious real estate conglomerates, her dream company. All she needed was a chance to show them her talent for interior design. A wave of nerves knotted in her stomach. If she got this job, she could finally afford her mother's medical bills. If she didn't want to consider that outcome. When the elevator doors opened, only one person was inside, an impeccably dressed man with dark, neatly styled hair and the faintest trace of impatience etched into his features. Caitlin offered a polite smile as she stepped inside. The doors sealed, and the hum of the motor enveloped them in an oddly intimate silence. "Which floor?" he asked quietly, noticing she was too jittery to push the button. "T21st, Caitlin managed, smoothing the wrinkles on her blazer. "Design department." He nodded and pressed the appropriate button. His manner was calm, self-assured, his movements fluid, as though he belonged in every space he entered. Though Caitlin was too focused on her interview to wonder much about him, she did sense a certain intensity in his gaze when it flickered her way. Something thoughtful, as if he read more about her than she realized she was revealing. The elevator lurched gently upward, each floor passing by in a blur of numbers. She told herself to breathe. Exhale. Inhale. But her mind refused to obey. She glanced at him once more, noticing the crisp suit, the subtle cologne that hinted at quiet wealth, the phone peeking out of his pocket, its screen briefly lighting with a message from a name she couldn't read. Something about him radiated purpose. Confident men in expensive suits were common in this building, she knew. Still, there was an unspoken weight in the air, a tension, an electricity she couldn't name. Then, with no warning, the elevator jolted to a dead stop between floors. Caitlin's heart thumped wildly. What just happened? Her eyes darted to the panel. She pressed the button for the next floor, but nothing happened. No, not today, she muttered under her breath. He frowned, tapping the emergency button. A static-laced beep echoed through the speaker, but no immediate response came. The overhead lights blinked twice before steadying, giving everything an unsettling glow. A voice finally crackled over the intercom. "Maintenance is on its way, folks. Sorry for the inconvenience. Please remain calm." There was an exhalation of relief from Caitlin, but the man in the suit seemed to tense. For a moment he ran a hand through his hair, composure wavering slightly. It was a fleeting gesture, but it was enough for her to glimpse that he wasn't all stoic calmness. He had his own brand of nervousness simmering under that polished exterior. Minutes ticked by, the silence magnified by the close, still air. Despite her own anxieties, Caitlin tried to focus on something other than her panic. She hated cramped spaces, especially ones that threatened to keep her from the interview of a lifetime. The tension pressed in on her. She glanced sideways at him again, deciding to break the ice. "Are you also here for the design department?" It seemed like a feeble guess. He didn't exactly look like a creative type, but maybe appearances deceived. He flashed a small, dry smile. "No, He paused. "I work upstairs." The way he said it was so vague, it spurred more questions than answers. But then again, Was it her place to pry? Before she could ask more, he pulled out his phone, presumably to call for help. He raised it, then lowered it with a frustrated sigh. "No signal," he said, voice taut with annoyance. "Figures." A tense hush followed. Caitlin's chest felt tight. She told herself not to panic, but anxiety was creeping in. This was more than a stuck elevator. This was possibly the end of her big break. The clock on the control panel told her that the interview would start in less than 15 minutes. She fought the urge to curse her bad luck. He noticed the flash of panic in her eyes and cleared his throat. "Hey, it's going to be okay," he murmured. "Even if you're a few minutes late, I'm sure they'll understand." She let out a shaky laugh. I need this interview. I've been applying for months. If they think I'm irresponsible—" Her voice trailed off, revealing more vulnerability than she intended. He offered her a sympathetic look, something that surprised her given his earlier detachment. "You can explain. Accidents happen." Then, as if to soften the blow further, he added, "I'd wager a broken elevator is out of anyone's control." Her eyes flickered with gratitude, but the weight of worry didn't dissipate. "I hope so." Time crawled. 10 minutes. 15. The lights flickered again. The man tapped his foot against the floor, a sign of building impatience. Caitlin ran her fingers over the strap of her handbag, checking her phone every few seconds, despite knowing it was pointless. He broke the silence with a quiet but direct question. "What's your name?" She blinked. "My name? It's Caitlin Rhodes." "Logan," he said simply. No last name, she noticed. The intercom sputtered again. "Maintenance here. The repairs might take a bit longer than expected. We apologize." The line crackled dead. Caitlin's shoulders slumped in desperation. Logan let out a measured breath. They exchanged a look, the kind people share when they both know they're stuck in a situation they can't fix easily. She forced a half smile. "Looks like we might be here for a while." He nodded, scanning the overhead panel one more time. "Seems so. Well, Caitlin, how about we try to stay calm?" Her throat felt tight, but she willed a nod. "So, do you actually know anything about the design team upstairs?" She ventured the question, hoping to distract herself from claustrophobia and disappointment. A mysterious glint sparked in Logan's eyes. "I've collaborated with them from time to time," he admitted. "They're always looking for fresh talent. I'm sure they'll be interested in you." Caitlin blushed with self-conscious hope. "Thank you, but you have no idea if I'm any good," she joked nervously. Logan shrugged, that small half-smile returning. "Sometimes you just know." Again, silence. But this time there was a strange warmth in the quiet. Something like understanding passing between them. It was as if this elevator, this stuck claustrophobic box, had momentarily peeled back the facade both had to wear in the busy city outside. The sincerity in each other's eyes was undeniable. Minutes trickled into what felt like hours. Anxiety pricked at Caitlin's skin, but Logan's unexpected presence kept her from sinking into full-blown panic. She found herself studying him. His posture, the elegance of his stance, the subtle tension in his jaw. She wondered if he was a top executive, maybe one of those board members they always talk about. But why would an executive ride the elevator alone, and so early in the morning? She almost asked him, but something about his guarded expression stopped her. Instead, she let the hush of shared tension linger, listened to her own heartbeat pounding, and tried not to imagine all the ways this day could unravel. Finally, after nearly half an hour, a harsh, grinding noise came from above. The ceiling lights flickered in a rapid strobe, and the elevator lurched downward with a teeth-rattling jolt. Caitlin yelped, bracing herself against the wall. Logan pressed a hand on her shoulder protectively. "Careful!" Her pulse hammered in her ears. Are we dropping?" A hollow clang echoed, Then everything stilled. Only the dim overhead lamp remained, flickering weakly. It was as if the building itself was deciding whether it would free them or swallow them entirely. Neither scenario felt certain. Sucking in a shaky breath, Caitlin mustered what little composure she had left. Okay, this is definitely not how I expected the day to go. Logan tried the emergency button once more, a static crackle. Then the same halting voice. We're trying our best. Hang tight, folks. Caitlin sank against the wall, her mind whirling between fear of missing her interview and fear for her own safety. Yet she couldn't ignore how Logan's demeanor steadied her, quiet, composed, even as tension radiated from him. In another life, maybe they would have just been two strangers sharing an awkward ride up to different floors, but fate had other ideas. Hey, he said gently, turning toward her with a curious, almost earnest expression. If you don't mind me asking, what's so important about this particular job? She hesitated, biting her lip. Should she open up to him? But there was something in his eyes that invited honesty. She took a breath. I studied interior design, but I've never really gotten the chance to prove myself. And this is the opportunity. A stable position, benefits. My mother's hospital bills keep piling up, and I just can't fail her. Logan's gaze softened, a genuine empathy behind it. He nodded slowly, as though he understood more than he let on. Then we'll make sure you don't fail. One way or another. She let the moment of encouragement settle in, grateful for it, even if it was from a total stranger. The elevator's metal walls felt a bit less suffocating at that moment. She told herself, maybe this is all part of a grand, unexpected plan. Maybe, just maybe, there's something beyond pure bad luck at work here. Through the stale air, she caught the subtle scent of his cologne again, and her racing pulse slowed. In the hush, she almost felt safe. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment, trapped halfway between floors, was the start of something neither had planned. A swirl of fate, an intersection of two lives, and the city outside kept on moving, blissfully unaware that in the stillness of one stuck elevator, a story was beginning that would change them both forever. A tense, low hum vibrated through the elevator shaft, as if the entire building strained to free them from this claustrophobic box. Caitlin tried not to dwell on her racing heartbeat or the fact that her interview had likely begun without her. Every so often, Logan tapped the edge of the metal panel, a soft drumming that betrayed his own agitation. The faint overhead light still flickered, drawing restless shadows across their faces. Then, without warning, a mechanical squeal resounded somewhere above. The elevator shuddered and dropped barely an inch, just enough to steal Caitlin's breath. She clutched the handrail in alarm. Logan steadied her with a light touch on her shoulder, and she felt a warm wave of reassurance, even as the adrenaline fired through her veins. The abrupt hush that followed was almost worse than the screech. It signaled some impending change, a twist of fate about to happen. Finally, with a sluggish groan, the elevator slid downward. It felt like a minor miracle, though it moved with excruciating slowness. The overhead light steadied and brightened, and the soft beep of the floor indicator kicked back to life. Caitlin's heart soared in cautious relief. She raised her eyes toward the ceiling, silently praying that they could exit soon, that maybe she wasn't too late for her one shot at a better life. Logan exhaled audibly, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Looks like we might make it out alive. She gave a nervous laugh, part joy and part disbelief. I wasn't so sure for a moment. The slight quiver in her voice revealed how shaken she truly was. As the doors opened at last, Caitlin squinted against the fluorescent hallway lights. Maintenance workers were gathered outside, fiddling with a control panel in the corridor. A security guard, face etched with concern, rushed forward. "Are you both all right?" he asked. "We've been working on that jam for half an hour." Logan gave a curt nod, smoothing his suit as though to compose himself. "We're fine. Just happy to be back on solid ground." He glanced at Caitlin, ensuring she wasn't about to faint. She managed a grateful smile at the guard. "Thank you. I was on my way to an interview." As soon as the words left her mouth, her eyes grew wide with alarm, remembering how much time had passed. One of the workers checked his watch. What time was the interview supposed to start? Caitlin's cheeks flushed. 15 minutes ago. She swallowed hard, the reality colliding with her sense of relief. Excuse me, I have to try anyway. Maybe they'll still see me." She gave Logan a fleeting glance. "Thank you for keeping me calm. Good luck with everything else." She wasn't sure what else to say. In any other situation, she might have asked for his last name or number, but the thought of being late for the interview swept aside any impulse for personal connections. Before Logan could respond, Caitlin clutched her portfolio to her chest and rushed down the hallway, turning the corner toward the design department. Each step echoed in the polished corridor. There was no time to tidy her hair or calm her frazzled nerves. She needed to show up, even if she arrived breathless and disoriented. At the design department's reception area, a sleek, modern space with glass walls and tasteful art, she skidded to a halt. A tall woman in a cream blouse sat behind a minimalist desk, scanning something on her tablet. She looked up, eyebrows arched. "Can I help you?" I'm Caitlin Rhodes," she panted. "I have an interview scheduled for... Well, it was supposed to be at 9. I'm so sorry, I got stuck in the elevator." The woman's expression was politely puzzled. "You're the candidate for the junior designer position?" Caitlin nodded, smoothing back a strand of hair. "Yes. Is Ms. Klein still available? I understand if..." Before she could finish, an older man with salt and pepper hair stepped out from a nearby glass-enclosed conference room. His gaze darted between Caitlin and the receptionist. "You must be Ms. Rhodes. I'm Trevor Hart, Senior Project Manager. We heard about the elevator situation." His tone was surprisingly cordial, though he radiated a certain high-strung energy that spoke of tight deadlines. Relief flooded through Caitlin as she struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like desperate excuses. "Yes, sir, I truly apologize for the delay." He waved off her apology. "Things happen. Come on in. You'll meet Ms. Klein shortly." Then, as an afterthought, "Welcome to L. Price & Co." The mention of the company name quickened her pulse. L. Price & Co. was the biggest real estate and design conglomerate in the region. They shaped entire cityscapes with their high-end buildings, legendary interior makeovers, and bold architectural projects. It was the place she'd dreamt of working ever since she first picked up a color wheel in design school. Trevor ushered her into the conference room, a modern space lined with sample palettes and design boards from various ongoing projects. Tall windows overlooked the city's skyline. Though her nerves hummed after the elevator ordeal, her fascination with the workspace overrode the remaining panic. She found herself staring at the well-ordered sketches pinned to the wall, visual storytelling of plush lobbies, sleek office spaces, and airy penthouse apartments. Within moments, Ms. Klein appeared, a poised, sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, exuding both warmth and an edge of no-nonsense leadership. She welcomed Caitlin with a firm handshake, apologizing for the inconvenience of the elevator breakdown. Her presence reminded Caitlin of a professor she once admired, someone who expected excellence but would guide you there if you showed promise. They sat at a pristine white conference table. Ms. Klein introduced a couple more team members, a design coordinator named Isla, and a junior architect called Damien. Each offered reserved smiles, scanning Caitlin curiously. Then all attention turned to her. "So," Ms. Klein began, "I've looked over your portfolio. You have some compelling ideas, especially around mixed textures and bold accent choices. We'd love to hear more about your approach." Caitlin took a careful breath. Despite her dryness of throat, she summoned the excitement she genuinely felt whenever she talked about design. She explained her concept of functional comfort, that spaces shouldn't just look expensive, they should be personal, memorable. She talked about color psychology, how certain palettes soothed stress in lounge areas or enlivened creativity in workspaces. Her normally quiet voice sparked with enthusiasm. She forgot momentarily about the sweaty palms and the lumps of anxiety from being late. Ms. Klein and the others exchanged subtle nods, occasionally jotting notes. There was a moment where Caitlin glimpsed a hint of approval in Ms. Klein's eyes, a spark that suggested Caitlin's vision might align well with the department's style. Even Trevor, who seemed distracted by phone notifications, paused to glance her way whenever she mentioned a distinctive design concept. The conversation moved swiftly. Her background, her design process, the software she used, her adaptability to high-end clients. At times, Ms. Klein tested her with hypothetical scenarios. If a client demands a dramatic color scheme you find tasteless, how do you pivot to balance their request with practicality? Or, how do you handle a limited budget for a high-traffic commercial lobby? Each time, Caitlin tried to give thoughtful, creative answers, occasionally sprinkling in references to her personal experiences or the projects in her portfolio. In the back of her mind, a subtle dread lingered. Had she missed too much time? Was the job effectively gone because of her tardiness, no matter the explanation? But Ms. Klein seemed genuine in her engagement, and Trevor occasionally gave short, affirming responses like, "That's a useful approach." They didn't appear to be brushing her off. When the formal portion wound down, Ms. Klein clasped her hands together. "Ms. Rhodes, we usually run these interviews in 2 phases, portfolio review and a follow-up with our lead executives. They like to personally meet prospective designers to ensure they fit our company culture." She paused, exchanging a meaningful glance with Trevor. "But there's some unusual scheduling happening this week. The CEO happens to be in-house today. If you're available to stay a bit longer, we might see if he can join us." Caitlin's heart skipped. The CEO? She'd never expected to meet someone that high up. Panic and excitement fluttered inside her. "Yes, of course," she answered immediately, ignoring the dryness in her mouth. "I'm here as long as you need me." Trevor nodded. "I'll check if he has a window." At that, Ms. Klein gave Caitlin a small, encouraging smile. "It's rare to meet him in person at this stage, but he's been more involved lately." Then, in a lower tone, she added, "The man's full of surprises." While Trevor went to make inquiries, Ms. Klein and the team offered Caitlin a glass of water. She sipped it gratefully, noticing how her own reflection shimmered in the immaculate conference table. The adrenaline from the morning's mishaps still surged, but something about the atmosphere, professional yet warm, kept her steady. Minutes passed, perhaps 10, with polite small talk about the city's latest design trends. Isla described a new project she was leading, a cutting-edge restaurant interior with suspended planters and custom lighting fixtures. Damien teased a new office concept he was drafting for a startup, and Caitlin found herself genuinely engrossed. These were her kind of people, the synergy she'd always envisioned for her career. Suddenly the door opened. Trevor stuck his head in, clearing his throat. He can see her now. He's in the executive lounge. His tone was neutral, but the subtle flicker in his eyes suggested importance. Ms. Klein nodded, turning to Caitlin with a subtle grin. "Ready for round 2? Tugging her blazer straight, Caitlin stood. Her nerves returned in a rush. So soon, after everything, she was about to be face-to-face with L. Price & Co.'s highest authority. Her mind buzzed with questions. Should she bring up the elevator fiasco, apologize again for being late, or simply present herself with confidence? As they walked through the corridor, Ms. Klein offered a reassuring wink. "Just be yourself," she whispered. "He appreciates authenticity." Caitlin clutched her portfolio, stepping into a wide hallway lined with modern artworks. Her footsteps felt curiously heavy, as if the building itself was laden with secrets. Finally, they reached a frosted glass door with the word "Executive" in sleek lettering. Trevor pushed it open, guiding her inside. The lounge was surprisingly welcoming, airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city's skyline and plush seating areas arranged for informal discussions. Soft, natural light fell across the polished floors. At the far end, near a wide mahogany table, a solitary figure stood looking out at the sweeping view. For a split second, Caitlin's heart fluttered with recognition, though she couldn't see his face. Then he turned around, and Caitlin's breath caught. It was Logan, the same man in the elevator, the one who'd reassured her in that cramped space, the same calm voice that told her, maybe it'll be all right. Except now, the mild lines of concern on his features were replaced with a composed authority. No tie was out of place. No hint of uncertainty lingered in his expression. He was the CEO. She nearly dropped her portfolio. Surprise lit in her eyes, mirrored by a subtle, knowing smile in his. In that moment, the world seemed to slow, as though every ticking second hammered home the realization that the man she had just confided in, her would-be elevator companion, held the entire company in his hands. Ms. Klein cleared her throat, entirely oblivious to the shock rippling through Caitlin. "Sir, this is Caitlin Rhodes, the candidate I mentioned. She's here for the design position." Logan's gaze flicked from Ms. Klein to Caitlin, something warm stirring in his dark eyes. "Yes, Ms. Rhodes and I have already met." There was the faintest trace of amusement in his voice. Heat rushed to Caitlin's cheeks. She opened her mouth, searching for words, any words, but found her mind was blank. No script could have prepared her for this revelation. She'd just told him all her worries, spilled her hopes in that stuck elevator, never imagining he was the top figure at L. Price & Co. Logan's lips curved in a disarming, polite smile. "I'm glad you made it here, Ms. Rhodes. Please, let's talk about your future at this company." And just like that, the moment froze. The morning's chaos, the broken elevator, the improbable bond, all twisted into something that felt bigger, like fate. Caitlin steadied herself with a small, nervous breath, stepping forward as Ms. Klein and Trevor discreetly stepped aside to give them space. In a low tone meant only for her, Logan murmured, "I guess we have more to discuss than we realized." Caitlin nodded, her voice only a whisper. "Yes, we do." It was the same Logan, but now his presence carried a weight that filled the executive lounge. Caitlin tried to grasp the sudden shift, from riding a stalled elevator alongside a seemingly ordinary stranger to standing before the very CEO of L. Price & Co. Her pulse throbbed with the realization that the man who had witnessed her vulnerabilities was also the one who could decide her professional fate. Logan directed a calm, almost reassuring glance her way. Ms. Klein, sensing the unspoken tension, stepped forward to break the ice. "Mr. Price, as we discussed, Ms. Rhodes here is an outstanding candidate for the new junior design position. She showed great initiative and creative thinking in the interview. I believe she has the potential to fit seamlessly with our design teams." "Indeed," Logan said, measuring his words. There was a flicker of a private smile before his expression turned businesslike. "Thank you, Ms. Klein." Trevor, who still hovered by the door, added in a lower voice, "We appreciate your time. I'm sure Ms. Rhodes would love to learn more about your vision for the upcoming project." He glanced at Caitlin, then back at Logan, uncertain whether he was overstepping. Logan acknowledged Trevor with a nod. "That's correct. Let's talk specifics." He gestured toward a nearby seating arrangement, a grouping of modern chairs set around a low glass table. "Please, have a seat." Ms. Klein and Trevor quietly found their places, but their eyes stayed on Logan, ready to engage if needed. Caitlin, nerves aflutter, carefully lowered herself into one of the chairs, placing her portfolio by her side. Though her posture was outwardly composed, her mind spun with questions. How was she supposed to address him? Did he want her to pretend they'd never met? The entire situation felt surreal. Logan took the seat directly across from her, clasping his hands loosely. The background hum of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows created an odd sense of intimacy in that wide, elegant room. "Ms. Rhodes," he began, letting each syllable settle, "I understand from Ms. Klein and your portfolio that you're passionate about interior design that merges comfort and functionality. Would you tell me a bit more about how you see that approach applied to our upcoming projects?" The question, though formal, offered Caitlin a life raft. It reminded her why she was here, her work. Despite the swirl of emotions, she forced herself to focus. She cleared her throat softly. "Of course, in my view, even luxury spaces benefit from thoughtful practicality. Whether it's a penthouse, an office suite, or a lobby, the environment should invite people in, not intimidate them. My design philosophy focuses on balancing high-end aesthetics with a tactile warmth, using fabrics, palettes, and layouts that flow naturally so clients feel comforted, not overwhelmed." Logan tilted his head in genuine interest. "So you prefer blending subtle color schemes with perhaps a single dramatic accent? Or do you see a bigger role for bold statements in multiple areas?" Caitlin launched into an explanation of her favorite creative techniques: contrasting textures, carefully chosen focal points, playful use of negative space. As she spoke, she could sense Ms. Klein nodding in silent agreement. Trevor occasionally interjected with a clarifying question about budgets or client needs, but mostly Logan let her lead. She noticed how he listened with attentiveness, not the polite, half-distracted courtesy of a busy executive. It was the same focused demeanor he'd shown when they were trapped in the elevator, as if he gleaned every detail from each breath she took. When she paused for air, Logan leaned back and exchanged a glance with Ms. Klein. "You have an instinct for how a space can feel alive, Ms. Rhodes. I admire that. Here at L. Price & Comer, we're always striving to introduce fresh perspectives." A ripple of relief coursed through her. She might have been speaking well, but the tension in her body was still braced tight. The memory of their personal conversation earlier echoed in her mind. The mention of her mother's hospital bills, her desperate need for this job, her confessions to him as though he was just another employee in the building. Would he use that knowledge somehow? It was impossible to tell. Trevor checked his phone, likely an appointment reminder, then looked at Logan and Ms. Klein. "Should we also mention the Westbridge penthouse project? It's a major piece on our docket, and we're short a designer now that Danielle has moved on." Ms. Klein clasped her hands, a sparkle lighting her eyes. "Yes, the Westbridge penthouse. It's set to be one of the city's most exclusive addresses, a top-floor oasis in the heart of downtown. Our client desires an interior that evokes a sense of timeless serenity." "That's one way of putting it," Trevor interjected wryly. "He's quite particular. This project is high stakes, a million details, a million ways to get it wrong." He turned to Caitlin, half smiling. "On the plus side, success here would catapult any rising designer's career. No question." Caitlin's heart fluttered. A major penthouse contract for L. Price & Coers would garner so much attention. Designers around the city would kill for a shot at such an assignment. Is there an expectation that the junior designer would be heavily involved?" she asked cautiously. Logan responded directly, "We want fresh voices contributing at all levels, including high-profile projects. Of course, everything happens under guidance from the senior staff, but your ideas would be heard. If you were to come on board, we'd see how well you mesh with the Westbridge team." Then, as if reading her mind, he added, "That could be beneficial for everyone." She picked up on the subtle emphasis, possibly referencing the conversation they'd had earlier. Her need to prove herself. A small, private smile darted across his face but vanished before Ms. Klein or Trevor seemed to notice. "Ms. Rhodes," Ms. Klein said brightly, "would you be willing to prepare a brief design concept for the Westbridge penthouse as a final part of your interview process? We'd give you the basic specs and let you propose your ideas. Nothing too large-scale, just a short presentation of your creative direction." Then, if it resonates with the team and the client, we could talk about an official contract." Caitlin nodded quickly, adrenaline pumping. "I'd be thrilled to. Thank you for the opportunity." Inside, she was imagining all the ways she could tailor the space: floating shelves to preserve the open city views, plush but minimalist seating in tasteful palettes, curated art that emphasized both serenity and subdued glamour. Trevor glanced at his phone again, then stood. "Unfortunately, I have a meeting in a few minutes. Ms. Klein, care to step out so we can arrange Ms. Rhodes's design brief schedule?" Ms. Klein rose, turning to Caitlin with an encouraging nod. "We'll get you the layout and client preferences. You can email or bring in your pitch later this week if that's enough time." "Absolutely," Caitlin replied, excitement and nerves blending in her chest. "Thank you both." Trevor and Ms. Klein collected their folders and headed for the door, leaving only Caitlin and Logan in the lounge. The moment the door clicked shut, the atmosphere shifted. A quiet hush fell between them, accompanied by the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. Logan exhaled as though shedding a formal persona. "I'm glad you decided to show up, even if the elevator tried to sabotage you." Caitlin gave a breathy laugh, glancing down at her lap. "I had no idea who you were. I'm so sorry if I said anything." He lifted a hand gently. "No apologies needed. I was in the elevator as me, and you were honest. It was refreshing." A warm note crept into his voice. "I don't always get that kind of honesty from people who know I'm the CEO." Her cheeks grew hot. She remembered how she'd confided about her mother's condition, how she'd hinted at her financial struggles. Perhaps it embarrassed her, but a part of her felt oddly comforted that he'd seen a genuine slice of her life, free of pretense. "I really appreciate what you said to me," she murmured, recalling how he'd offered reassurance, telling her not to worry about being late. "You didn't have to do that." Logan's gaze softened. "You remind me of why I started this company in the first place. Sometimes, in the thick of corporate responsibilities, we lose sight of the raw passion that drives creativity. Meeting people with that passion, it's grounding." He paused, scanning her expression as if gauging whether to say more. "Also, seeing someone so determined, someone whose heart is clearly in the work, makes me remember that good design isn't about fancy degrees or nepotism. It's about those who truly want to make beautiful, functional places." A silence filled the space, heavy with unspoken understanding. Caitlin felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: admiration, curiosity, and a slight intimidation, all colliding inside her. She breathed carefully, reminding herself that while this moment felt personal, it was also a professional encounter. "Thank you," she said at last. "I won't let you down." He gave a light nod. "I know you won't. But do me a favor. Treat me like an equal team member on the Westbridge project, at least in your design process. Don't let the title intimidate you. If you have an idea, share it. If you spot a flaw, point it out. I'd like your candid perspective." She tried to imagine disagreeing with him in a meeting if she felt a design choice was off. It was daunting, but she could see he meant it. "All right," she said softly. "I can try." "Good." Logan stood, adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket with an elegant efficiency. "Now, we should probably rejoin Ms. Klein. She'll want to set your timetable for this concept pitch. The sooner we have a design direction for Westbridge, the better." His tone resumed a crisp edge of professionalism, but his eyes shone with that lingering warmth from earlier. Caitlin rose too, her knees feeling slightly wobbly. "Yes, let's do that." She clutched her portfolio, stepping toward the door, but halfway there she paused, looking back at him. "Logan?" He arched an eyebrow. It was the first time she'd spoken his name in that familiar way since leaving the elevator. "Yes?" She took a breath, summoning the courage. "Thank you again for everything this morning." He dipped his head in a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. "Any time, Ms. Rhodes." They walked out together side by side, but carefully maintaining the invisible boundary that separated them in the eyes of the staff. He as the CEO, she as a prospective junior designer. Yet a current of quiet understanding flowed between them, an awareness that whatever started in that elevator had not ended at the interview's close. Ms. Klein was waiting just outside, tablet in hand. She greeted them with a friendly yet inquisitive look, as if wondering how that private conversation had gone. "So," she said briskly, "we'll set Ms. Rhodes up with the Westbridge specs and we can see her concepts by next Friday. Does that sound good to you both?" Logan glanced at Caitlin, letting her confirm. She nodded. "Yes, Friday is great, thank you." "Perfect," Ms. Klein replied. "Follow me to my office and I'll give you all the materials. Then we can talk next steps." She motioned for Caitlin to accompany her down the corridor. Caitlin cast Logan one final look, half smiling. He returned the expression, something in his gaze telling her that he was both her potential boss and an unexpected ally. Then Ms. Klein guided her away, deeper into the halls of L. Price & Co. The tinted sunlight spilled across the polished floors, bright and full of promise. The future no longer felt like a distant hope. It was tangible, beating in her chest with the thrill of possibility. And behind it all, Logan Price stood at the helm, no longer just an imposing corporate figure, but the man who had met her in a broken elevator and shown her kindness in a raw, honest moment. Little did she know that this was only the beginning. The Westbridge penthouse, her mother's hospital bills, the swirl of corporate politics, and her blossoming connection to Logan would soon interlace in ways she could never have anticipated. But for now, as she followed Ms. Klein to gather the next steps in her design test, one thing was certain: her life had changed irreversibly in a single morning. When the elevator doors slid open onto the design department's floor later that same afternoon, Caitlin stepped out, clutching a slim stack of files Ms. Klein had given her. At the top was a folder marked Westbridge Penthouse, Preliminary Specs. She took a moment to steady herself, inhaling the faint scent of fresh paint and new carpeting. The hum of phones ringing, designers consulting over mood boards, and the background rattle of a coffee machine reminded her that she wasn't dreaming. She was in, at least for a trial run. Just beyond the open office space, Ms. Klein guided her into a modest but functional cubicle, its partition walls peppered with pinned fabric swatches and color test strips. "This can be your temporary spot for now," Ms. Klein said with a polite smile. "Once we finalize your position, we'll move you closer to the main design studio. But I thought you'd like some space to think, away from the bustle." Caitlin nodded gratefully. "This is perfect. Thank you so much." With the slightest nod, Ms. Klein handed over a series of large-scale floor plans. "For the Westbridge test, you'll want to review the layout carefully. The penthouse has an unusual shape, an L configuration that merges two corner suites. The client insists on retaining partial dividing walls for a sense of cozy separation, though we also need an open flow for entertaining guests. It's a challenge, but a fun one." Caitlin ran her eyes over the complex floor plan. She could already imagine potential vantage points for the panoramic city views. "I see. The living area is massive, but the bedroom wings are narrower. That suggests we can play with illusions of expanded space in the corridors, maybe with reflective surfaces or curved lines." Ms. Klein's lips twitched with approval. "Precisely. We want something distinctive, but we have to keep the client's taste in mind. He's partial to subdued palettes, subtle elegance, no garish statements." The thought of balancing bold ideas with a conservative client made Caitlin's pulse quicken. This was the kind of creative puzzle she loved, weaving personal vision into the constraints. "I'll do my best." "Good," Ms. Klein said, stepping back to check a message on her tablet. "If you have any questions, I'm just across the hall. I'd like you to prep a small concept board by Wednesday or Thursday so we can offer feedback before your formal pitch on Friday." The timeline left Caitlin only a handful of days to devise something impressive, but she embraced the pressure. Understood. Thank you for the opportunity. Once Ms. Klein left, Caitlin settled at the desk and opened the folder wide. The penthouse's dimensions leapt out at her, beckoning her imagination to run wild. She had pencil and sketch paper, plus a laptop L. Price & Co. had loaned her for drafting. Each detail in the folder, window dimensions, building materials, existing color schemes, formed puzzle pieces. She flipped pages, occasionally glancing at the fabric swatches pinned around the cubicle for inspiration. Her mind whirled, bursting with ideas. Plush seating nooks framing the city lights, transitional spaces to balance the cozy separation the client craved, accent pieces that whispered luxury without shouting it. The energy was so intense that time blurred, and she barely noticed the office clearing out for lunch until a gentle rap sounded on the cubicle's edge. Caitlin looked up, eyes momentarily foggy from focusing. It was Damien, the junior architect she'd met earlier. "Hey, I was about to grab something to eat," he said, offering a friendly grin. "Want to join? Figured you might be hungry after that jam-packed morning." She checked the time on her phone, nearly 1:30. Her stomach growled in agreement. "Sure," she said, sliding the Westbridge papers into a neat stack. "I'm definitely hungry." Damien led her down the corridor, chatting about the best places for a quick bite nearby. They ended up at a sleek cafeteria on the lower floor, far nicer than she'd expected, with modern lighting and an array of healthy lunch options. While they stood in line, Caitlin couldn't help but notice the hush of voices behind them. A few employees whispering about the CEO's new focus on design, or rumors that Logan Price was personally overseeing certain projects. Her cheeks warmed at the mention of his name, and she hoped Damien wouldn't spot the flush on her face. They grabbed salads and water bottles, then sat at a table near a picture window. The view overlooked a small rooftop garden which offered a surprising burst of greenery in the middle of the city. Damien asked polite questions about her background, where she studied, how she honed her aesthetic. She gave him the short version, skipping over how desperate her financial situation was or how vital this job was for her mother's medical bills. That was private. In turn, Damien shared that he'd been at L. Price & Co. for about 2 years, focusing on architectural details and ensuring design aesthetics aligned with structural feasibility. "I can help you with anything that straddles design and architecture," he said, pointing a plastic fork her way, "especially if you need to push the boundaries a bit. Sometimes senior management won't realize where walls can be tweaked or expansions can be made." Grateful, Caitlin gave a small laugh. "I might take you up on that. The Westbridge layout is definitely unique." Damien's eyebrows rose. "Ah, so they've started you on that already? Impressive. That's a high-profile project. The client is known to be picky, but if you get it right, the payoff is huge." Caitlin lowered her gaze to her salad, that spark of nerves returning. "I just hope I'm not in over my head." "You'll do fine," Damien reassured. Then with a grin, "Anyway, Ms. Klein doesn't let incompetent people near that project. Trust me, she must see your potential." She felt a flurry of warmth at his compliment. The thought that her manager believed in her enough to hand her such a coveted test project was both exhilarating and terrifying. After lunch, she returned to her cubicle, diving back into research mode. The hours flew as she drew rough sketches, tested color palettes on a digital board, and compiled a folder of inspirational images. Her phone buzzed occasionally with messages from the hospital about her mother's upcoming treatments, each notification reminding her why she needed to excel at this. She made a mental note to visit her mother soon, though she dreaded the conversation about mounting bills. By the time 5 o'clock neared, the design floor began emptying out. People said quick goodbyes and gathered laptops in cases. Caitlin stayed glued to her seat, refining a rough layout for the living area. She was tracing a stylish, curved partition on her screen when a presence lingered behind her. She turned, startled to see Logan. He stood with hands in his pockets, tie loosened slightly as if winding down from the day. He glanced at her sketches with quiet curiosity. "That's quite a concept you're building," he said in a low voice. "I like how you're creating that partial wall near the lounge. It'll give the occupant privacy without blocking the skyline." Her heart thudded, and she silently thanked the near-empty floor. She didn't want to attract gossip. "Thanks. I'm still trying out ideas." He nodded, stepping close enough to get a better view of her screen. The subtle cologne from earlier in the morning tugged at her memory of the elevator. "It's good to explore. Sometimes the best designs come from iterative tinkering." She closed her laptop halfway, partly to focus on him, partly to conceal the half-finished roughness of her attempts. "I appreciate the advice. Did you, need something?" A faint twitch of a smile curved his lips. "Actually, I came to see how you're settling in, and also, I remembered your concern about your mother. I might be overstepping, but if you need any flexibility or resources, let me know. I prefer my employees handle personal matters without undue stress." His gesture of concern made her throat tighten. "That's very kind," she managed, feeling a swirl of gratitude, embarrassment, and confusion all at once. "But I can handle it. I promise." Logan studied her face. "I won't push, but keep me informed." He hesitated as if weighing his words. "Also, your probationary period here is primarily about whether you mesh with the team. But from what I've seen, I'm certain your design skill is a strong match. Don't let nerves sabotage you." She tried to smile, though her pulse thrummed. "I won't. This chance, it means a lot." A brief flicker crossed his face, something understanding, almost protective. "I'm glad." Then, stepping back, he said quietly, "Well, it's getting late. Make sure you get some rest." His voice lowered. "Don't stay up all night on the penthouse concepts. Burnout helps no one." She nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest she couldn't quite define. "I'll remember that." He offered a polite dip of his head, then strode toward the hallway. She watched him go, 100 unspoken questions swirling. Did he see her only as a promising recruit, or was there some deeper interest sparking between them? His kindness felt genuine, yet she reminded herself, he's the CEO. He's kind to everyone he values. She needed to stay professional, keep her eyes on the work that would secure her mother's future. Once Logan disappeared into the elevator lobby, she exhaled sharply and packed up her things. The building seemed emptier and more cavernous as she headed out, the last echoes of employees' footsteps fading into silence. When she emerged on the street, the summer sun was dipping behind tall buildings, painting the horizon in purples and oranges. Walking to the bus stop, Caitlin clutched her portfolio bag like a lifeline. Thoughts of color schemes and room partitions mixed with the memory of Logan's quiet, concerned tone. She tried to push aside her personal feelings. There was no room for illusions. She'd be better off focusing on the design test. At home, she lived in a modest studio, peeling wallpaper, a cramped kitchenette, but neat and orderly. She set her bag down and immediately checked her phone for hospital updates. A voicemail played back. "Ms. Rhodes, this is billing at Hopewell Medical. We need you to confirm the next payment arrangement by the end of the week. Please call us back." The note ended with a dull beep. She sank onto her small couch, rubbing tired eyes. The tension she'd held at bay all day burst through. She needed money, consistently, reliably. If she secured the position at L. Price & Co., maybe she could keep up with those hospital bills. But the road between now and a solid paycheck was lined with challenges: the demanding client, the final interview steps, corporate politics, and looming over all was the intangible closeness she'd unexpectedly developed with the CEO. After a brief moment of self-pity, she forced herself off the couch. She flicked on her laptop, intending to do more research, yet she paused, remembering Logan's advice not to overwork to the point of collapse. Reluctantly, She decided to heed it. She'd at least eat something and give her mind a break before returning to design ideas. Later that evening, after a simple dinner, she unrolled a large sketch pad on her coffee table. In pencil, she mapped out each major penthouse section: entry foyer, living area, bedroom suite, a small library nook, the open-plan kitchen that curved along the windows. Gradually, she added her concept elements: the partial walls, the strategic lighting plan for mood shifts, a palette of calming grays and creams with accents of deep teal. Time seemed to slow as she immersed herself in creativity, letting her imagination and practicality meld. She considered how the occupant would move through the space, pausing to admire city lights or gather friends around a stylish bar. Each angle, each vantage point would influence the design. And behind every line she drew, she remembered that this was more than a test. This was a potential key to safeguarding her mother's health. By midnight, her eyelids grew heavy, and her drawings were half-finished. Taking one final glance at the swirl of possibilities on paper, she closed her sketchbook. She rubbed her neck, anxious to see how these ideas would measure up to Ms. Klein's high standards, and to the even higher standards of the elusive client. And in the depths of her mind, she couldn't help but wonder what Logan might think if he saw these early concepts. Would he admire her boldness? Offer a thoughtful critique? Exhaustion soon won out over her restless thoughts, and she sank into bed, letting the city's distant bustle lull her. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, more deadlines, maybe a hospital visit to see her mother. But tonight, at least, she allowed herself to dream about the penthouse she was shaping, about the possibility of a stable, fulfilling career, and, somewhere in the corners of her consciousness, about the man who had stepped out of an elevator's shadow and unexpectedly offered her a glimmer of hope. In the hush of the sleeping city, she whispered a simple promise to herself: I will make this work. For my mother. For me. She drifted off, unaware that her life was on the verge of unraveling in unforeseen ways. Threads of ambition, duty, and forbidden emotion weaving into a story far more complicated than a mere design project. Caitlin slid off the bus 2 blocks from the hospital, the morning sun barely cresting the skyline. She clutched her purse and a small paper bag containing homemade muffins, her mother's favorite when she felt well enough to eat. The familiar antiseptic odor of the lobby made her stomach knot with memories of sleepless nights, calls from billing, and the looming question of how to balance work with her mother's care. At the reception desk, she signed the visitor's log and flashed the nurse a polite smile. Here to see Sharon Rhodes. The nurse typed something on her computer. She's awake, Ms. Rhodes. Room 412. Caitlin forced a grateful nod. The hallways were crowded with hushed footsteps and the subdued chatter of families in waiting rooms. She tried to calm her accelerating heart. The last thing she wanted was to bring her mother more worry than she already carried. Pushing open the door of room 412, she found her mother propped against crisp pillows, her graying hair tied in a loose braid, eyes gazing wistfully out the window. Despite the hospital gown and the IV line attached to her arm, she still wore the trace of a gentle smile, the same one that had always made Caitlin feel safe. Good morning, Mom. Caitlin approached the bed, setting the paper bag on the rolling table. How are you feeling? Sharon's face lit up, though fatigue underlined her features. Better, sweetheart. The doctors say I might see improvement soon if I stay consistent with treatments. That's great news. Caitlin swallowed the lump in her throat, wishing she could share more optimism about the financial side. I brought muffins. Blueberry, your favorite. Sharon's eyes glowed. You shouldn't spend time baking for me, not when you have that big new job. She trailed off, scanning Caitlin's tense expression. You do still have it, right? That interview you told me about, did it go okay? A swirl of relief and excitement rose in Caitlin's chest. Yes, actually. It went better than I could have hoped. I'm on a trial period, but I'm already tackling a major project, a penthouse design. If it goes well, I'll be hired full-time. Her mother took Caitlin's hand, gently squeezing. I knew they'd see your potential. Just remember not to burn yourself out. I'll be careful. Caitlin attempted a reassuring smile, knowing how easily she could lose track of time poring over color palettes and sketches. How about you? Is the new medication helping? Sharon's face clouded momentarily. She shrugged. They say it's early, but the side effects are tough. She looked toward the door as if making sure no one else was listening. There's also, well, I got another reminder about the bills. I'm so sorry, Katie. I hate that so much of this falls on you. A pang of guilt shot through Caitlin. She tried to speak softly. Mom, it's okay. I'm handling it. Once the job is secure, we'll set up a proper payment plan. I promise, we'll figure it out. Before her mother could protest, a nurse stepped in to check vitals. Caitlin used the distraction to compose herself, bottling up her anxieties about finances. She leaned over to kiss Sharon on the cheek. I'll come by again soon, okay? Rest for now. Her mother nodded, eyes full of love and worry. Take care, Katie, and good luck with that penthouse. Leaving the hospital, Caitlin tried to bury the swirl of emotions under a mental checklist for the day. Finalize the living area sketches, confirm an appointment with Ms. Klein for feedback, and hopefully build more detail into her concept boards. She arrived at the L. Price & Comber building with determined energy, the memory of her mother's hopeful gaze propelling her forward. Up on the design floor, she found Damien waiting outside her cubicle with a grin. Morning, he said, extending a coffee cup. A little pick-me-up. Figured you might need it. Caitlin's shoulders relaxed at the kind gesture. Oh, thank you. You read my mind. He handed over the latte, then tapped her desk. I was reviewing some of your sketches from last night. Ms. Klein asked me to check the feasibility of that curved partition you proposed. Just wanted to let you know, it's definitely doable. We might need to shift one of the structural beams, but with the right permits, it's feasible. Relief spread through her like warm sunlight. That's great. I was worried we might have to compromise that element. Damien shrugged, leaning against the partition wall. We'll have to run it past Ms. Klein and the client, of course, but so far everything looks solid. As he left, Caitlin pulled out her revised floor plans and set about refining them for an internal review. She lost track of time in the swirl of digital modeling, color swatches, and furniture-style references. Sometime near midday, Ms. Klein swung by her cubicle, gave the layout a quick glance, and offered a nod of approval. This is shaping up well. I'd like to schedule a preliminary review with the client next week, an informal chat so they can see the direction. Think you can have a polished concept board ready by then? Yes, absolutely. Caitlin's heart fluttered. Meeting the client in person would be huge. Another chance to prove she was more than just a temporary hire. I'll make it happen. Once Ms. Klein stepped away, Caitlin allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. But as she was tidying her workspace, her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Figuring it might be the hospital or a vendor call, she answered quietly. Ms. Rhodes? The voice was male, polite but firm. This is Billings from Hopewell Medical Billing Department. I'm reaching out about the overdue payments. Caitlin's throat constricted. Yes, I've been meaning to call you back. I've just started a new job and... Ma'am, we do understand, Billings said not unkindly. But we need confirmation on when you can resume payments. If we don't receive a plan soon, we may have to halt some of the more advanced treatments until there's a financial guarantee. Her pulse hammered. The possibility of her mother's treatments being paused was unthinkable. Yet what could she do? She only had a promise of a job, not a full contract or a signing bonus yet. I'll figure something out, she managed, voice trembling. Please, just give me a little more time. After ending the call, she stayed crouched behind her cubicle wall, struggling to swallow the tide of panic. This was her worst fear made real. that her mother's health could be compromised by a ledger's red ink, and if the new job didn't finalize soon. A shadow fell across the cubicle entrance. Caitlin glanced up, heart lurching, only to see Logan standing there, concern etched into his features. She hadn't even heard him approach. "You okay?" he asked softly, looking from her pale face to the phone she gripped tightly. Her instinct was to straighten, to hide the vulnerability, but the intensity in his gaze made it impossible to brush off. I'm fine," she began unconvincingly, forcing a shaky smile. "Just some personal stuff." Logan's expression flickered with empathy. After a moment he leaned in, voice low. "Walk with me to my office," he said, not a command but a gentle request. She hesitated, aware of the attention that might draw from colleagues, aware of the gossip if the CEO was seen whisking her away. But the genuine concern in his eyes outweighed her reservations. She nodded, rising from her chair. They walked side by side through the office, keeping a discreet distance. A few curious glances followed them, but no one said anything. When they reached Logan's spacious office, a corner suite framed by glass walls and a sweeping view of the city, he closed the door behind them softly. "Have a seat," he offered, gesturing to a small conference table in the corner rather than the intimidating expanse of his desk. She sank into a chair, pressing her lips together. The city skyline shimmered behind him, a reminder of how high up he was, both literally and figuratively in the corporate structure. He settled across from her, hands resting on the table. "I overheard a bit about billing. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to intrude, but if you need help, I can offer some short-term assistance, a personal loan or an advance." He paused, searching her face. "I know it's not standard policy, but I don't want you losing sleep over something that might be solvable." Caitlin's cheeks flared with both gratitude and discomfort. "That's incredibly kind, but I couldn't accept. It'd feel like taking advantage or mixing business and personal matters in a dangerous way." A gentle seriousness settled over his features. "It's not advantage if it's a solution for a valued team member. I've done it before in extreme cases, if I trust that the person can handle repayment responsibly." Her eyes misted with emotion. She sensed the sincerity in his tone, yet she also feared how it might look or what it might imply. She wrestled inwardly, torn between the pressing need for her mother's treatment and the pride that insisted she handle this on her own. "Logan, I appreciate it more than you know, but I haven't even secured my permanent position yet." He offered a faint smile. "I've seen enough to know it's only a matter of time. Your designs are impressive, Caitlin, and I trust Ms. Klein's instincts." He laced his fingers together. "But it's your decision. If you'd rather find another route, I understand." She gazed out at the city, heart pounding with confusion. The conversation took her right back to that elevator moment, realizing Logan wasn't just some helpful stranger. He was a powerful figure with the means to do what others couldn't. Finally she spoke, voice hushed. "Let me think about it, please. It's not a no, just give me a bit of time." He nodded, leaning back in the chair. "Take all the time you need, and if there's anything else, I hope you'll come to me." A tightness in her chest loosened, replaced by an odd warmth. The sincerity in his eyes reminded her that behind the CEO title, behind the wealth, there was a man who seemed genuinely concerned for her well-being. She didn't fully understand why, but she recognized how rare that was in a world where money often overshadowed compassion. She cleared her throat, straightening. "Thank you. I'll keep that in mind." Logan rose, gesturing that they should head back. Before opening the door, he gave her a subtle look. "No matter what you decide, your position here doesn't hinge on it. I value your work, Caitlin. That remains true, regardless." She smiled, a fragile but genuine curve of her lips. "I appreciate that. Truly." He escorted her to the threshold, and when he opened the door, they both slipped back into the measured roles of CEO and designer. Colleagues bustled about, paying only faint attention. But Caitlin felt a shift, a deeper bond forged in that quiet conversation. Returning to her cubicle, she let out a shaky exhale, glancing at the Westbridge sketches on her screen. The swirl of lines and shapes blurred for a moment. Her mind raced with the offer Logan had made. A personal loan or an advance could buy time for her mother's treatments. But accepting might entangle her in obligations she wasn't sure she could balance. Still, the raw gratitude she felt toward him wouldn't vanish. He'd reminded her once again that there was more to their connection than professional politeness. For reasons she couldn't name, he genuinely cared, and she couldn't deny that part of her welcomed the kindness as a lifeline, no matter how complicated it might become. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the quiet hum of the design office. She had a presentation to finalize, sketches to refine, a mother to care for, and a potential lifeline she had never imagined. One thing was certain: none of this was simple, and every day the stakes rose higher. Yet there, in the heart of a corporate empire and a personal crisis, a small, persistent voice inside Caitlin told her to keep pushing forward, to trust that amidst the financial struggles, the demanding design brief, and her quiet bond with Logan, she might yet find a path that honored all she held dear. The next few days passed in a blur of drafting and fine-tuning concepts for the Westbridge penthouse. Caitlin channeled all her anxieties and the lingering memory of Logan's offer into something productive. Each pencil stroke or mouse click felt like another stitch sewing her life together. If her mother's health weighed on one side of the scale, she tried to balance it with the promise of success at L. Price & Co. By Wednesday afternoon, she had compiled a preliminary version of the concept board. It was a digital collage of color palettes, furniture styles, and 3D sketches showing the penthouse's potential. Subtle yet textured neutrals played off curved partitions, with accent lighting to create a sense of intimate luxury. She displayed these on her screen in the design lounge, waiting for Ms. Klein's feedback. Damien hovered nearby, offering an occasional thumbs up or quiet suggestion. "This curved feature," Ms. Klein said, scrolling through one of the 3D mock-ups on Caitlin's laptop. "It's elegant. I love the arched silhouette, but the client might worry about losing space. We'll need to prepare a rationale for how it still maximizes flow." Caitlin took note, nodding. "I'll add extra notes in the next iteration. Maybe show how the curve can double as a built-in bookshelf or niche." "That could help," Ms. Klein agreed. "Overall, you're on the right track. I'd say spend the next day or two polishing these up for our internal review on Friday. Then we'll schedule a quick chat with the client early next week, let them see if the direction resonates." Caitlin's heart quickened. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." Ms. Klein sent her a small, approving smile. Before leaving, she paused, scanning Caitlin's expression. "You seem a bit tense. Everything okay?" For a split second, Caitlin considered confiding in her manager about the hospital bills and the personal burdens, but she decided against it. She didn't want pity or special treatment, and she definitely didn't want to risk Ms. Klein second-guessing her readiness for high-stakes projects. She mustered a confident look. "I'm fine. Just focused, I guess." Ms. Klein gave a polite nod. "Don't forget to breathe, Ms. Rhodes. We do our best work when we're balanced." With that, she left, and Caitlin let out a measured sigh. She found Damien's gaze lingering on her. "She's right, you know," he said quietly. "It's easy to get buried under deadlines. Sometimes stepping away for a moment brings fresh ideas." Caitlin tried for a light laugh. "I'll consider that. Maybe after I finalize these boards." Damien gave a friendly wave and departed, leaving her alone in the lounge with the hum of air conditioning and the faint clack of someone typing in the distance. She glanced at the clock. Already past 6. Most of her colleagues were packing up. She should probably do the same. But the knots in her stomach told her she wouldn't be able to rest until she resolved the design details for her next revision. She returned to her cubicle, fired up her modeling software, and let herself sink into the creative flow. Shapes on the screen morphed under her deft clicks, walls shifted, accent pieces brightened or darkened. Time slipped away in that quiet corner of the office. Occasionally footsteps crossed the hallway, but she barely noticed. At some point past 8, the overhead lights dimmed, energy-saving mode after most employees had gone. Only then did she realize how late it was. She stretched, rolling the kink from her shoulders. A rattle of keys and voices from the corridor hinted that the cleaning crew had arrived. Maybe I should head home, she thought. Yet a wave of inspiration whispered, just one more tweak. Fix the lighting plan near that lounge partition. She reopened her design file. 10 more minutes of work, no more. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice a tall figure approaching until a gentle cough broke her focus. Startled, Caitlin turned and saw Logan standing behind the cubicle's half wall, hands in pockets, tie undone slightly. The sight of him made her heart flutter, though she tried to keep her composure. "Working late again?" he asked, voice low in the hushed office. She bit her lip. "Just wanted to finalize something for tomorrow's review. I lost track of time." He nodded, then glanced at the overhead lights, half-dimmed. "I'm guessing you haven't eaten dinner?" Her stomach answered with a soft growl, which she hoped he didn't hear. "I might have forgotten," she admitted sheepishly. Logan's gaze flicked to her screen. "Your dedication is admirable, but Ms. Klein's right. Burning out won't do you any favors. Why don't we grab a quick bite, even if it's just something from a nearby deli? My treat." Surprise rippled through her, mingling with a frisson of concern. Socializing alone with the CEO might look questionable, yet the sincerity in his eyes and her own hunger persuaded her. "I guess that could be nice," she said softly. "Thank you." He offered a faint, appreciative smile. "Let's go then. I know a place that stays open late, just a few blocks away." They walked through the near-empty corridors in silence. Caitlin's nerves buzzed with awareness. She replayed the quiet conversation about her financial troubles, his offer of help, her mother's precarious health. Would he bring it up again? She didn't know if she was ready to talk about it, but somehow being around him made her feel less alone in the struggle. Exiting into the cool evening air, they headed down the street, the city lights glimmering above. The din of traffic and distant laughter from late-night diners surrounded them, creating a cocoon of urban nightlife. Logan led her into a small bistro with warm lighting and wooden tables. It was cozy and unpretentious, which surprised her. She'd have guessed he might frequent upscale restaurants. They settled into a corner table. Only a handful of customers lingered, mostly engrossed in their meals or conversation. A friendly waitress handed the menus, and Logan waved politely, indicating Caitlin should order whatever she liked. After a moment of scanning the choices, she opted for a simple soup and bread. Logan went for a light pasta dish. When the waitress left, a gentle hush fell between them. Caitlin fiddled with the edge of her napkin. "I guess it's not typical for you to dine with new hires," she ventured, half joking to mask her nerves. He offered a soft chuckle. "No, it's not." He considered her, elbows resting lightly on the table. "But it's also not typical for me to meet prospective employees in a stalled elevator, or to see them stay late working on a crucial project that could define their career." She swallowed, heat creeping up her cheeks. "True, this has been an unconventional start." Logan's gaze held hers. "I'm sorry if all of this has been overwhelming. Your mother's situation, the pressures here." He paused, his voice gentling. "I meant what I said about helping, not just financially, but with your workload. If you need extended deadlines, more resources, you can ask." She looked down, heart clenching with gratitude and a flicker of discomfort. "You've already done so much, just by giving me a chance here. It's a lot to handle, but I'm managing, and I do appreciate your concern." Their food arrived. offering a momentary reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. She tasted her soup, savory and warm. He twirled pasta around his fork, glancing at her as if weighing what to say next. As they ate, she slowly relaxed, the tension melting in the face of simple companionship. The talk turned to the West Bridge project. She explained how she hoped to incorporate subtle illusions of depth with mirrored panels, or maybe hidden lighting strips. Logan nodded thoughtfully, asking questions that showed a keen understanding of design nuances. They finished their meals, the waitress clearing plates. A hush returned, charged yet oddly comforting. The city beyond the bistro window glowed in golden lights, car headlights sliding past in fleeting streaks. Caitlin took a breath, deciding to speak the words that had pressed on her for days. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said, voice quiet. "The personal loan or advance. I still don't feel entirely right about it, but the hospital bills, they're threatening my mother's treatment. If I lose that time..." Her throat tightened. "I can't risk it." Logan set his water glass down carefully. "I understand," he said. "You don't have to decide now, but if you need it, I'll arrange everything discreetly. No public fuss, no strings attached." Her eyes stung with grateful tears she fought to keep at bay. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't forget your kindness." Then, forcing a wobbly smile, she added, "And I promise the Westbridge pitch will be worth every penny I repay." He returned her tentative smile with one of quiet confidence. "I have faith it will be. But separate from that, I just want you to know you're not alone. Work might be demanding, but you have resources, allies, and me, if you choose." The sincerity of his words stirred something in her chest, a fragile sense of safety in a world that felt so precarious. "I appreciate that more than you know." Outside, a clock struck 9:30, the bistro staff beginning to wind down for the evening. Logan insisted on paying. They stepped back into the crisp air, the building's tall silhouettes looming in the near distance. A mild breeze curled around them. Caitlin looked at Logan, the street lamp illuminating the faint lines of exhaustion beneath his eyes. "You work late a lot, don't you?" He shrugged. "Comes with the territory, though I'm trying to remember how to balance it. So I guess we're both guilty of burning the midnight oil." A soft laugh escaped her. For a moment, the formality dissolved, leaving only two people standing under city lights, each facing personal battles, each unexpectedly finding solace in the other's presence. "Let's get you home," he said gently. "Where do you live? I'll call you a cab or—" "No need." She gestured to the bus stop. "I'm used to the route. Besides," she teased lightly, "I think people might gossip if they saw the CEO driving me around." A trace of wry amusement crossed his lips. "Fair enough." He glanced down the road. "But just to be sure you're safe, I'll wait until the bus comes." Caitlin didn't protest, sensing it would be futile. They strolled to the bus stop, standing in companionable silence as headlights flickered across the street. The hush felt peaceful, with no need for forced conversation. A sense of mutual understanding, the tender beginnings of trust, seemed to hang in the air. When the bus rumbled up, she turned to him. "Thanks again, Logan, for dinner and for everything." He gave a half smile. "Anytime, Caitlin. Get some rest." Stepping onto the bus, she found a seat by the window. Through the glass, she watched Logan remain on the curb until the bus pulled away, as if ensuring she was really gone and secure. Something about that simple gesture made her chest tighten, a swirl of emotions she couldn't yet name. All the way home, her mind drifted between the Westbridge project and the quiet promise in Logan's eyes. She was well aware that mixing personal need and professional ambition was risky, even scandalous in some eyes. But fate had thrust them into each other's paths. If relying on his help meant saving her mother's life, perhaps it was a risk worth taking. Deep in the night, long after she'd returned to her modest apartment, Caitlin found herself sketching new ideas for the penthouse again, this time with an almost feverish excitement. She could already see the shapes, the lighting, the textures in her mind's eye, almost tangible in their beauty. Maybe she was chasing more than just design perfection. Maybe she was chasing a future where compassion and ambition could coexist without tearing her apart. By the time she finally let herself drift to sleep, one thought lingered like a beacon. She wasn't facing this alone anymore. And in that realization, for the first time in ages, she felt less afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Friday morning dawned with a sense of hushed anticipation on the design floor. The clock ticked toward 10 a.m., the hour set for Caitlin to present her refined penthouse concept to the internal team. Ms. Klein, Trevor, Damien, and any other senior designers who wanted a preview before the client presentation next week. Despite the tension, Caitlin felt ready. She'd spent the past 2 days polishing her ideas, incorporating the feedback Ms. Klein had given, and infusing each design choice with her unique touch. She'd arrived early, armed with a bright poster board of color swatches and digital mock-ups on her laptop. While she waited in the small conference room, she smoothed her blouse for the 10th time, mind dancing with nerves. Damien was the first to walk in, offering her an encouraging smile. "You've got this," he whispered. Shortly after, Ms. Klein strode in, tablet tucked under her arm, expression purposeful but calm. Trevor, the senior project manager, followed, chatting with another architect about unrelated company business. Once they settled around the table, Ms. Klein nodded at Caitlin. "Whenever you're ready." Caitlin stood, heart thumping, and projected her prepared slides onto a wall screen. With a steady breath, she launched into her pitch. "The Westbridge penthouse is all about combining subtlety with moments of warmth," she began. "We don't want cold modernism, nor do we want excessive ornamentation. My concept finds a middle ground, soft neutrals to highlight the natural light, a few curved structures for shape and movement, plus carefully chosen accent pieces to reflect the client's preference for understated luxury." She clicked to the next slide, a 3D rendering of the living area. The partial curved wall shimmered in a gently textured paint, doubling as a shelving nook with concealed LED lighting. Open sightlines offered sweeping views of the city skyline. Low-profile furniture anchored the space, complemented by a plush rug that drew in a feeling of cozy sophistication. Damien leaned forward, eyes bright. "The curvature seamlessly integrates. And I see you used that hidden beam concept I mentioned?" Caitlin nodded. "Yes. By adjusting the structural support, we keep the open space while giving the impression of a gentle corridor that distinguishes the lounge from the main walkway." Trevor flipped through the printed copies on the table. "It's visually quite striking. I like how you've balanced the light so it's not blinding at certain times of day." "Exactly," Caitlin said, pointing to another slide. "Soft, recessed lighting lines the edges of the windows to create a transition at sunset. No harsh glares. It's also an opportunity for mood settings, a bright daytime look that fades to a more intimate evening ambiance." Ms. Klein made a note on her tablet, her face carefully neutral, though her eyes gleamed with interest. "This is a strong layout, Ms. Rhodes. The question is whether the client will go for the curved partition or see it as wasted space." "I've added a cost outline," Caitlin replied, pulling up a short spreadsheet. "It shows that while initially more expensive due to structural tweaks, it could increase the property's unique appeal. The design is distinctive but not ostentatious." Trevor studied the numbers. "That's helpful. Our job will be to convince the client the payoff is worth the cost. It's definitely a conversation piece, makes the penthouse stand out in the market." There were a few more questions about material choices, maintenance, and the possibility of offering alternative shapes in case the client balked at the curves. Caitlin answered each one carefully, holding on to the confidence she'd built. When she finished, Ms. Klein leaned back in her seat. "Well," she said, a hint of pride in her tone, "I'd say you're well prepared for the client preview. We'll refine a few talking points, but you've done impressive work in a very short time, Ms. Rhodes." A warmth flooded through Caitlin. "Thank you," she managed. "I'm grateful for the guidance." Trevor tapped the table with a satisfied grin. Let's aim for a quick internal rehearsal on Monday afternoon. Then, if everything's good, we'll bring the client in Tuesday. Sound like a plan? Absolutely, Caitlin agreed, relief mingling with excitement. The group disbanded, each heading off to their other tasks. As Ms. Klein passed by Caitlin, she murmured, "Good job. Really, I see why Logan was so enthusiastic." Then she left, not waiting for a response. Caitlin's stomach flipped. She hadn't known Logan had spoken about her to Ms. Klein, much less shown enthusiasm. The thought sent a small thrill through her. Of course, it could have been purely about her design potential, but part of her couldn't help but wonder if he'd mentioned her outside the context of work. She gathered her materials, heading back to her cubicle. Damien poked his head over the partition. "You nailed it," he said with a grin. "I think Ms. Klein is secretly excited. She rarely praises designs so directly during internal reviews." "It's a huge relief," Caitlin admitted. "But the real test will be the client." Damien gave a playful shrug. "That's everyone's real test, but I believe they'll like it. The design sells itself." He paused, then lowered his voice. "Any plans to celebrate? It's Friday after all." A cautious smile crossed Caitlin's lips. "Not sure. My main celebration might be sleeping in tomorrow." Damien laughed. "Fair enough. But if you ever want to grab coffee, let me know." He ambled away, leaving her with the impression he was just trying to be friendly. She appreciated his warmth, but couldn't shake the memory of Logan's more personal attention. She spent the next few hours refining her notes, adjusting slides, and ensuring every aspect was neatly archived for Monday's rehearsal. By mid-afternoon, a wave of fatigue hit her. She realized she'd been running on adrenaline since morning. The weekend beckoned, but she also had her mother to consider. Shortly before 5, she turned off her computer and decided to visit her mother again at the hospital. She wanted to share the good news, even if it was only a small milestone. Maybe it would buoy her mother's spirits. Packing up, she made her way to the elevator lobby. As she waited for the doors to slide open, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Leaving early for once, Ms. Rhodes?" She spun to see Logan leaning casually against the wall, his expression somewhere between teasing and curious. She managed a slightly sheepish grin. "I guess you could say that. The big presentation went well this morning, so I'm heading out." A nod of approval touched his features. "I heard. Ms. Klein was impressed. Congratulations." Her pulse fluttered. "Thank you. I'm just glad she likes it enough to show the client." She paused, deciding to be honest. "I'm actually on my way to see my mother." Concern flickered in his eyes. "How is she doing?" Caitlin shifted her bag over her shoulder. "About the same. The doctors are hopeful, though. I just want to keep her spirits up." She hesitated, recalling his offer of financial help. She still hadn't given him a definitive answer, though she was leaning toward acceptance. He seemed to sense her hesitation. "If anything changes, if you need assistance, I'm here," he repeated quietly. She offered a soft, grateful smile. "I'll remember that. Thank you." The elevator dinged. They stepped in together, the doors closing on a brief hush. She stood near the panel, feeling the subtle tension in the confined space, an echo of their first fateful meeting. Would she always remember that moment when they got stuck, forging an unlikely bond? "Any big weekend plans?" he asked, trying to break the silence. She shrugged lightly. "Not sure yet. I'll definitely work on refining the Westbridge pitch, but maybe I'll allow myself one day off." Her tone turned a bit playful. "Taking your advice, you know. Avoid burnout." A hint of a laugh crossed his face. "Good. I'd hate to see you lose that creative spark because you're too exhausted." They arrived at the lobby. Stepping out, they navigated the marble floor, passing security desks and the revolving doors that led out onto the bustling city street. Caitlin turned to Logan, uncertain whether to say goodbye there or continue walking side by side. He solved her dilemma by pausing near the exit. "Have a restful weekend," he said, voice dropping as if to convey something more personal. "I'll likely be in and out of the office, but do something fun if you can." She nodded, a small wave of warmth spreading in her chest. You too. Maybe try not to live in your office all weekend? His lips curved. I'll try. Then he stepped aside, giving her the space to leave. She walked into the bright afternoon light, the city noise a sudden contrast to the office's hushed calm. Glancing back just once, she caught sight of Logan disappearing into the crowd of employees and visitors, already pulled in some new direction. But for a fleeting moment, it felt like they shared a private world. The trip to the hospital was easier than before, buoyed by the small victory she'd earned at work. Her mother dozed in bed when she arrived, but stirred as soon as Caitlin gently touched her hand. They talked about the penthouse project, Sharon beaming with pride at each mention of Caitlin's accomplishments. You're doing it, sweetheart, she said, voice soft but joyful. All those nights you spent drawing on the living room floor. It's paying off. A surge of emotion welled in Caitlin. I just hope it continues to, she whispered, squeezing her mother's hand. I can't lose this chance. Sharon's face turned solemn. I know you feel the weight of my medical bills, but you mustn't let that overshadow your future. Just do your best, Katie. That's all anyone can ask. Caitlin swallowed the tears threatening to spill. I promise. For an hour they chatted about lighter things, memories of Caitlin's childhood, silly stories about old family friends. Sharon's fatigue eventually won out, and she drifted back to sleep. Caitlin kissed her cheek goodbye, leaving with renewed resolve. If all went well at L. Price & Coburn's, her mother would have the care she needed. Saturday morning found Caitlin perched at her kitchen table, laptop open, a cup of tea steaming beside her. Morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the half-finished sketches scattered around. She knew she was supposed to rest, but her mind buzzed with refinements for the Westbridge concept. She spent a couple of hours revising color palettes and writing a short script for how she'd pitch it to the client, practicing how to answer tough questions. By noon, she forced herself to stop, recalling Logan's admonition about burnout. It felt strange to have free time. Anxiety gnawed at her, whispering that she should be working. Yet she pressed on, deciding to do something normal. She changed into comfortable clothes and ventured out for a walk in the local park, letting the greenery and sunshine wash over her senses. Each step in the dappled light reminded her that her life was more than hospital visits and design presentations. She had passions outside of work, an interest in photography, a love of art galleries. She'd buried those hobbies, afraid to distract from paying bills. Perhaps if the job became permanent, she could reclaim a piece of herself that wasn't overshadowed by financial strain. But alongside that hope was the nagging awareness of Logan's offer. If the client pitch succeeded, she might earn enough soon enough to keep her mother's treatments on track without any personal loan. Still, if something went wrong, if the client hated the design, she might be left with no job and mounting debts. Her heart thudded at the risk. Shaking off the worry, she continued her stroll, inhaling the floral scents of spring. She decided she'd finalize her decision about Logan's help after the client meeting. If the project feedback was positive, maybe she'd manage on her own. If it wasn't, well, she'd cross that bridge then. Monday would come swiftly, and with it, the rehearsal for the Westbridge presentation. In the meantime, she could at least enjoy the sunlight on her skin, a fleeting taste of calm amid the storms of uncertainty. By the time she returned to her apartment, the sky was turning a warm gold. She smiled, thinking how Logan had been right. Stepping away, even briefly, made her mind feel clearer, her designs sharper. She resolved to keep that balance, though she suspected her path was about to get far more complicated. Little did she know just how pivotal the coming days would be, not just for her career but for the entangled threads of personal and professional loyalty that were forming around her and Logan. Monday arrived faster than Caitlin expected, bringing a crisp sense of purpose to L. Price & Co.'s design floor. She found herself in early, organizing files and loading her final presentation slides onto a tablet. Today was the internal rehearsal for the Westbridge penthouse pitch, a final polish before the actual client meeting the next day. Damien stopped by her cubicle, offering an encouraging grin. "Ready to wow everyone again?" Caitlin gave a small laugh that masked the swirl of nerves in her stomach. "I hope so. The real test is tomorrow, after all." "Well, Ms. Klein wants this run-through in the main conference room. We'll all be there to grill you with the toughest questions," Damien teased. She exhaled shakily. "Perfect. Nothing like a bit of pressure to start the week." They walked together to the large conference room, a corner space with sweeping windows that let in morning light. Inside, Ms. Klein had already set up a screen. Trevor was there, along with 2 other senior designers and an associate who handled budgeting. Everyone wore that distinctly focused air, notebooks and coffee cups in hand. "Morning, Ms. Rhodes," Ms. Klein greeted, face composed and ready for business. "Whenever you're set, we'll begin." Caitlin inhaled, stepping to the front of the room. She connected her tablet to the display, launching into her now familiar pitch. She showed the curved partition wall in 3D renderings, flipping to close-ups of the built-in shelving and accent lighting. She explained how each space, lounge, bedroom, library nook, flowed into the next without sacrificing privacy. She delved into the cost analysis, prepared to field tricky questions. The small group listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances or nods. When she finished, Ms. Klein led a mock Q&A, asking the type of pointed questions she expected from the client. Why should they invest in the structural shift for that partition? How does your lighting plan accommodate variable daylight throughout the year? What if the client wants a bolder color accent in the living area? Caitlin answered each with measured confidence. Every so often she'd catch Damien giving her a discreet thumbs up, or Trevor scribbling notes with a faint smile. The seniors probed for weaknesses, but she held her ground. By the end of the session, Ms. Klein tapped her tablet, satisfied. "Good, very good," Ms. Klein pronounced, scanning the room for consensus. "She's prepared. I think the client will respond positively, especially if we highlight the practical benefits of these design elements." Trevor nodded. "Agreed. Make sure you have a handout summarizing the main points. Some clients like a tangible reference. I've already prepared a 1-page summary," Caitlin assured him, offering a small folder. "Design philosophy, key visuals, and approximate budgets." Ms. Klein's approval showed in her eyes. "Well done, Ms. Rhodes. We'll confirm the time with the client for tomorrow, likely mid-morning. You'll do the presentation and I'll chime in if needed. Trevor will discuss cost feasibility. Then we'll open it to questions." Caitlin's heart thudded with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "Perfect. I'll be ready." The group dispersed, returning to their respective projects. Damien lingered just long enough to whisper, "Told you you'd wow them," before heading out. As Caitlin packed her things, Ms. Klein approached more quietly. "Logan might sit in," Ms. Klein said, voice kept low. "He's expressed interest in seeing how the client reacts. He's personally invested in the Westbridge success. Just a heads up." Caitlin felt a tiny jolt. "Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know." Ms. Klein's gaze flickered with something like curiosity, but she only nodded and strode away. Caitlin swallowed, suddenly aware of the extra layer of scrutiny. Having Logan present would heighten both the stakes and the personal undercurrent of their connection. She couldn't deny that part of her wanted him there, though, to see firsthand how she carried the vision they'd discussed, how she might fulfill the promise he believed she had. That afternoon, Caitlin dashed out during lunch to visit the hospital. She'd planned for a quick stop, hoping to give her mother a short update before the big day tomorrow. The nurse on duty gave her a polite nod, recognizing her from frequent visits. In room 412, her mother sat upright in bed, sifting through a magazine with mild distraction. "Katie," Sharon greeted warmly. "I didn't expect you today." Caitlin approached, placing a gentle hand on her mother's shoulder. "Tomorrow's the client pitch. I might not be able to come by, so I wanted to see you." Sharon's face brightened. "The pitch already? Goodness, Time's flying. Caitlin perched on the edge of a nearby chair. She explained how the design was nearly finalized, how Ms. Klein gave her the green light, and how she felt both thrilled and anxious. Sharon listened attentively, occasionally stroking Caitlin's hand. "I'm so proud, sweetheart," Sharon said, "though I can see the worry in your eyes. Don't let it steal your joy. You've worked so hard for this." Caitlin swallowed a knot in her throat. "I'm trying, things have to go well. I need them to." Her mother's eyes shone with empathy. "You'll do your best, and that's all anyone can do. Meanwhile, I'm responding decently to treatment. The doctors seem optimistic." "That's a relief." Caitlin's chest loosened. She hesitated, debating whether to mention the possibility of financial help from Logan. But the complexities felt too fraught to explain. Instead, she forced a reassuring smile. "Let's keep that optimism going, okay?" They chatted a few more minutes before a nurse arrived to draw blood for tests. Caitlin kissed her mother's forehead gently. "I'll see you soon. Love you, Mom." Sharon squeezed her hand. "Love you too. Good luck tomorrow." Leaving the hospital, Caitlin felt a mixture of comfort and dread. While she was grateful her mother seemed stable, the looming specter of unpaid bills persisted. No matter how well she pitched the Westbridge design, she couldn't guarantee the project alone would solve everything overnight. Back at the office, the rest of Monday moved at a steady pace. She made last-minute edits, updated the slides, and double-checked her budget references. By the time evening rolled in, she felt as prepared as she could be. She decided to leave at a decent hour, following the advice she'd given herself about not burning out. When she descended the elevator to the lobby, she nearly jumped at the sight of Logan waiting near the security desk. He appeared to be in conversation with a junior executive, but when Caitlin passed, his gaze flicked to her in recognition. He politely wrapped up his discussion and approached her. "Heading out?" he asked in a quiet tone, away from prying ears. She nodded, hugging her laptop bag. "Yes, I've done all I can for tomorrow." His lips curved faintly. "I heard your rehearsal went well. Ms. Klein was complimentary." "She was. I'm still anxious, but I guess that's normal." Logan's expression softened. "It is. You're presenting a major project. Nerves are natural. But from what I've seen, you're more than capable." That gentle confidence in his voice eased her tension for a moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "You might see me in action tomorrow, then?" A flicker of amusement touched his eyes. "I plan to attend, yes. Don't let that rattle you, though. I'll just be another face in the room." "Right," she managed, forcing a small laugh. "Just the CEO of the entire company, no pressure." Logan stepped a bit closer, his tone softening further. "We're on the same team, Caitlin. I'm rooting for you. Remember that." Her pulse thudded. Their eyes locked for a heartbeat, the swirl of unspoken connections passing between them. She nodded, momentarily speechless, then offered a brief farewell. "See you tomorrow." Walking out into the twilight, she felt both steadied by his encouragement and more keenly aware of the complicated dynamic forming between them. The city lights flickered overhead, an echo of the hopes and fears she carried in her chest. That night, a subdued hush filled her apartment as she carefully laid out her notes and laptop, triple-checking every aspect of the presentation. She tried to picture the client's face, picky, possibly resistant to big changes. She rehearsed how she'd handle negative feedback or last-minute demands. Eventually, exhaustion took over and she fell asleep with half-formed design details drifting through her dreams. Morning arrived with crisp clarity. Caitlin dressed in a neat, tailored outfit, professional yet comfortable. She told herself, "Breathe, relax. You've got this." Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "You'll kill it today. Let's do this." She smiled at the supportive message, gathering her nerves. At 9:30, Ms. Klein ushered her into the same large conference room. The client was scheduled for 10. The table was arranged with bottled water, neatly printed copies of Caitlin's concept summary, and a digital screen ready to display her visuals. Trevor double-checked if the projection equipment worked. Ms. Klein placed a sleek folder at each seat. Logan slipped in just before 10, positioning himself near the side of the room rather than at the forefront. He offered Caitlin a subtle nod. She felt comforted by his presence, though she prayed she wouldn't let him down. Finally, a well-dressed older gentleman arrived, accompanied by a younger associate. He introduced himself as Mr. Alden, an investor in the Westbridge property. His manner was politely reserved, an air of wealth and exacting standards clinging to every word he spoke. Ms. Klein handled the pleasantries. "We have Ms. Rhodes here to present our proposed design," she said, gesturing to Caitlin. Caitlin took a steady breath and launched into her practiced spiel. She guided Mr. Alden through the penthouse's layout, highlighting the curved partition's unique selling point, how the lighting scheme adapted to different times of day, and how the subtle palette allowed for personal touches. She presented a short cost-benefit analysis. Trevor chimed in at the right moments, reinforcing the budget viability. Mr. Alden studied the slides with rapt concentration, occasionally leaning over to speak quietly with his associate. His expression remained inscrutable, giving away little. Caitlin did her best to remain poised, answering each question he posed about maintenance, alternative color schemes, or long-term property value. Then came the nerve-wracking part, the curve. Mr. Alden zeroed in on it. "So this partial wall, it's visually interesting, but doesn't it diminish the open feel of the penthouse?" Caitlin's heart pounded. She slid to a 3D view that showed how the line of sight continued beyond the curve. "We intentionally set it with a wide passage. From most angles, the city view remains intact. Meanwhile, the curve offers a sense of cozy separation for reading or small gatherings. It's a subtle boundary that helps the space feel more personal." He took that in, nodding slowly. "And you're sure the structural changes aren't too costly?" Trevor quickly supplied the budget summary, and Caitlin added, "We believe the distinctiveness it provides will increase appeal in the market. It's a penthouse, after all. Buyers expect something unique." Mr. Alden frowned thoughtfully, tapping a pen on the table. The tension in the room rose. Caitlin forced herself to maintain a calm exterior. Finally, he exhaled, glancing at Ms. Klein. "It's not the standard approach, which is precisely why it may stand out. I'm intrigued. Let's see if the final build can match what you've shown me." A sense of quiet relief fluttered through Caitlin's chest. She could see Ms. Klein's posture ease slightly. Logan, from his spot near the wall, offered the faintest encouraging smile. They fielded a few more questions about potential color alternatives if a future buyer craved something bolder, or how quickly the space could be adapted if tastes shifted. Caitlin answered each with measured detail, showing she'd anticipated such concerns. Eventually, Mr. Alden closed his folder, exchanging a final comment with his associate. "I appreciate the thoroughness," he said, standing. "Let's proceed with this direction and finalize the design details in the coming weeks. I'll expect regular updates on the build feasibility." Ms. Klein gave a professional smile. "Of course. We'll ensure transparency every step of the way." As they shook hands, Caitlin's heart soared. Once Mr. Alden departed, a wave of relief spilled over the team. Damien practically beamed from the sidelines. Ms. Klein turned to Caitlin, her eyes shining with approval. "Well done." Caitlin let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. Trevor patted her shoulder in a fatherly gesture of congratulations. Logan approached last, once the flurry of activity quieted. He caught her gaze, nodding in a private show of pride. "Congratulations, Ms. Rhodes. You were impressive." Her cheeks warmed. "It was a team effort." He arched a subtle brow. "True, but your vision led it. Now we move on to the next phase, implementing the design. Ready? A wave of exhilaration coursed through her. This signaled not just approval of her concept, but the strong likelihood she'd earn a permanent spot at L. Price & Co. Absolutely, she managed, the single word carrying all her gratitude and hope. A tap on her phone startled her from the moment. An incoming call. She glanced down. Unknown number, but local. Her heart stuttered, suspecting it might be the hospital. She excused herself politely, stepping into the hallway to answer. "Ms. Rhodes," came the familiar voice of Billings from Hopewell Medical Billing. "I'm calling about your account again. We've held off on any treatment changes, but we need confirmation for the next payment cycle. If we don't see a deposit by the end of this week, we'll have to reassess your mother's regimen. I'm sorry." Panic seized her. "I understand," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'll figure something out." Ending the call, she pressed her lips together. The joy of the successful client pitch wavered under a wash of dread. She had a chance now, but it wouldn't immediately pay the bills. Even if the project guaranteed her job, the actual compensation might still come too late. She slipped her phone into her pocket and leaned against the wall, fighting tears. Then she heard footsteps behind her, and a warm, familiar presence enveloped her senses. Turning, she found Logan, brow knit with concern. "You okay?" he asked, voice hushed. A swirl of conflicting emotions roiled inside her. Only a minute ago, she'd been on a triumphant high. Now she remembered how precarious everything still was. She took a shaky breath, meeting his gaze. "I got the call again," she whispered, hating how vulnerable she felt. "They might change my mother's treatment if I can't pay soon." Logan's expression tightened. Gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder, the simple gesture brimming with empathy. "Let's talk in my office," he murmured. She nodded, letting him guide her down the corridor, away from the celebratory chatter in the conference room. The lines between personal need and professional success felt impossibly blurred. But as they walked, Caitlin knew one thing for sure. In the wake of her biggest design victory, she might also be facing her most crucial decision, one that would pull her and Logan ever closer, binding them in ways neither had expected. Logan's office felt quieter than usual as he gently closed the door behind them. Gone was the bustle of colleagues congratulating Caitlin on her successful pitch. Gone was the warmth of communal energy. Here, the hush pressed in, illuminated by city lights streaming through the broad windows. Caitlin clutched her phone in her hand, struggling to steady her breath. "Sit," Logan said softly, gesturing to a pair of comfortable chairs arranged by a low table rather than his imposing desk. It was a subtle sign he wanted this to be a conversation, not an interrogation. She sank onto the edge of one seat, posture rigid, as though any moment she might spring back up. He settled across from her, hands loosely clasped, face shadowed with concern. "Tell me what happened," he prompted. The words spilled out in a trembling exhale. "The billing department called again. They're giving me until the end of this week to make a payment, or they'll scale back my mother's treatment options. She can't afford that. She needs every bit of care to keep her condition stable." She tried to keep her voice level, but the fear leaked through each syllable. Logan listened intently, saying nothing until she finished. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm sorry. This is exactly the kind of pressure you don't deserve right now." His tone stayed measured, thoughtful. "You know my stance on this, Caitlin. If you'll allow me, I can help cover those immediate costs. You can reimburse me as your salary and project bonuses come in." Her lungs tightened at the idea. She'd known it was likely to come to this, a crossroad where she had to weigh pride versus necessity, professional distance versus personal rescue. After a beat of silence, she swallowed the lump in her throat and spoke. "Logan, if I accept your help, it changes things. People could misunderstand. They might think I'm getting special treatment or that I'm using our connection to get ahead." Her cheeks warmed, recalling how easily rumors could swirl in a corporate environment. Logan's expression flickered with gentle resolve. I understand the concern, but we can keep it discreet. A small personal loan, a private contract. It doesn't need to be public knowledge. She twisted her phone in her hands. The rational part of her recognized that, ethically, she should be free to accept a personal arrangement if both parties were willing. Yet an undercurrent of emotion, gratitude, vulnerability, even an undeniable spark of attraction, made it feel deeply complicated. Her voice wavered. I don't want to owe you in a way that compromises my place here. I want to earn my position by my own work. Logan reached out carefully, resting his hand lightly over hers. Caitlin, you've more than proven your value. The Westbridge project is just one example of what you can do. This loan wouldn't buy your loyalty or overshadow your talent. Think of it as an act of kindness from someone who wants to see you succeed without losing what matters most, your mother. The sincerity in his eyes was so clear it nearly undid her. She felt tears threatening to gather. She inhaled sharply, reminding herself to remain composed. All right, she said at last, the word trembling on her lips. If we can do it discreetly, yes, I'll accept your help. Relief flickered across Logan's face, but he stayed calm, not pushing too hard. We'll keep it strictly businesslike in format. A short-term loan with an agreed repayment schedule. I'll have the legal department draft something, but I won't mention names or details, just an internal notice that I'm extending a personal loan. They handle these requests for me occasionally for philanthropic or private reasons. She nodded, still reeling from the enormity of the decision. I can't thank you enough. His hand gave hers a small, comforting squeeze. You don't have to. Just keep doing what you do, creating brilliant designs. Slowly he let go, and she found herself missing the warmth of that brief contact. Silence settled in the office. She gazed through the glass walls at the gray-blue sky beyond. Her chest felt hollow and full at once, gratitude mingling with the faint sting of pride. Would she regret crossing this boundary? Or would it simply stand as a lifeline in a time of crisis? At last, Logan eased back in his seat. Let's finalize details soon. The deposit for your mother's care can go out immediately. Then you'll repay me gradually from your salary, bonuses, or however we decide. Okay. Her voice was barely above a whisper. This week is crucial. They need something by Friday. He nodded, making a mental note. Then we'll make sure it's arranged by tomorrow afternoon. That way the hospital sees funds coming in with time to spare. She swallowed, a faint quake in her stomach. Thank you, she repeated, wishing there were stronger words to convey her relief and the swirl of emotions beneath. He gave a slow, resolute sigh, then glanced at her with a gentler look. You realize that your success today with the client is the biggest reason you're secure here, he said, as if clarifying that the loan wasn't fueling her career path. Ms. Klein is thrilled. Trevor, too. They'll likely present you with a formal job offer soon. Junior designer on a permanent basis. Her eyes widened. Really? That fast? A smile teased the corner of Logan's mouth. They already see your worth. And I'll be honest, in this company, I trust Ms. Klein's instincts. If she's satisfied, then so am I. A wave of happiness surged through her, like a fresh breeze clearing away stale anxiety. She'd fought so hard for this, the chance to break out of financial desperation and prove her design prowess. That's incredible news. He laughed softly, a subdued sound. I know it doesn't solve everything overnight, but it's a start. She nodded, tears of gratitude forming again. You're right. It's huge. They stood, an unspoken sense that the conversation was concluding, yet neither moved toward the door immediately. The hush between them bristled with a dozen unspoken possibilities, the complexity of mixing personal crises with corporate power, the flicker of mutual respect that edged into something deeper, the knowledge that a line had been crossed but also that a new bridge was built. Finally, Logan stepped aside. "If there's anything else," he began, trailing off in a soft invitation. Caitlin clasped her laptop bag to her chest like a shield. "I'll let you know," she murmured. "This is enough for now." He opened the office door, letting her exit first. As they walked down the corridor, the normal hum of the design floor greeted them. No curious eyes seemed to follow, but Caitlin felt that sense of secrecy throbbing in her heart. She was stepping deeper into an arrangement that could so easily be misread if discovered. But for her mother's life, for the future she craved, she would carry this weight and hope it didn't crush her. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur. Ms. Klein asked for final documentation from the Westbridge meeting. Damien dropped by to share rumors of an upcoming company-wide event, a gala to celebrate new developments, where employees could mingle with investors. Caitlin tried to keep her concentration on her tasks, but her thoughts churned with the impending arrangement. By day's end, Logan quietly confirmed that the hospital deposit would be in process by Wednesday. A faint sense of relief cut through her tension, giving her the will to focus on design tasks. True to his word, Wednesday morning brought a discreet message from a legal staffer. "Mr. Price asked me to coordinate a personal loan arrangement. Please sign the attached documents electronically." They included a simple agreement with a schedule for monthly repayments at minimal interest, just enough to mark it as formal, not a gift. Caitlin's hand shook as she clicked through each form. She half expected something hidden or manipulative, but it all looked straightforward, respectful. She signed. Early that afternoon, a nurse from the hospital called to confirm they'd received a partial payment on Sharon's balance. "We can maintain her current treatment plan," the nurse said, relieved. "Thank you, Ms. Rhodes." Caitlin's eyes brimmed with tears at her desk. She sniffed, fighting to contain a public display of emotion. It was a small victory in the sea of medical expenses, but it bought time that might mean everything. She whispered a private, fervent thanks to Logan, though she kept working as if nothing had changed. Toward evening, Ms. Klein summoned Caitlin to her office, a bright corner space lined with shelves of design volumes. Caitlin walked in, nerves lacing her limbs, unsure what awaited. Ms. Klein sat behind her tidy desk, but when Caitlin arrived, she rose and waved her toward a pair of chairs near the window. "I'll get straight to the point," Ms. Klein said with a measured smile. "We're ready to formalize your position here. The Westbridge project demonstrated that you can handle high-level work, and your approach fits our culture. So, we'd like to offer you the permanent role of junior designer, effective immediately." Caitlin's mouth went dry. She'd expected something in the near future, but not this soon, not in the middle of the week. I'd be honored," she managed, voice trembling with gratitude. Ms. Klein handed over a folder with the official letter. "This includes details on salary, benefits, and the rest. You'll still report primarily to me and the senior team, but your project scope will likely expand. Does this sound acceptable?" "Absolutely." Joy surged in her, a quiet, profound wave that nearly brought tears. "Thank you so much, Ms. Klein. I promise I won't disappoint you." "I'm confident you won't," Ms. Klein said, her usually stoic face warming with genuine approval. "Congratulations, Ms. Rhodes." Leaving Ms. Klein's office, Caitlin clutched the folder to her chest. She exhaled a trembling breath. Official. She was truly part of L. Price & Co. now, not just an uncertain temp on a trial run. This meant stable paychecks, a chance to plan, and deeper involvement in future projects. The rest of the day blurred in a haze of congratulatory remarks from Damien and a couple of the other designers who caught wind of the news. Trevor gave her a business-like handshake of welcome. She felt a swirl of gratitude, an almost out-of-body sense that life was turning in her favor. As she logged off her computer at the close of the day, her phone buzzed with an incoming text. "Logan, congratulations on the formal offer. I heard from Ms. Klein. This is well-deserved." A spark of warmth spread in her chest. She typed a quick reply. "Caitlin, thank you. I couldn't have done it without your support, both professional and otherwise. Logan, you earned this on talent alone. Glad I could help in any small way. Let's catch up tomorrow. Maybe discuss Westbridge updates?" Caitlin's heart fluttered. The fact that Logan could speak so casually about her personal lifeline and her blossoming career all in one breath felt both comforting and terrifying. But she smiled at the phone screen anyway. "Caitlin, sounds good. I'll see you tomorrow." She pocketed her phone, realizing she was practically the last one left in her section. Gathering her things, she made her way out. Outside, dusk fell softly over the skyscrapers. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the city's hum settle around her. For once, the chaos of life felt a degree quieter. Her mother's treatment was safe for now. Her job was secure. She was building momentum in her career. Yet beneath the calm, a flicker of unease remained, the knowledge that she'd accepted a personal loan from the CEO, and not just any CEO, but one who seemed to care for her beyond the boundaries of typical management. She worried how easily that arrangement could become public knowledge or misunderstood. But as she set off toward the bus stop, the intangible bond she shared with Logan carried more reassurance than fear. They'd created a fragile pocket of trust in a corporate world known for its sharp edges. Perhaps, as she stepped further into her new role, she'd discover if that trust could hold up under scrutiny, or if it would drive them both down a path neither had fully anticipated. For now, she let the city lights guide her home, one step at a time, each breath laced with cautious hope for a future that suddenly felt more open, more possible, and more dangerously intertwined with the man at the center of it all. Caitlin stood at the window of her new workspace, a glass-walled nook overlooking the bustling city below, taking in the sight of scaffolding and steel far beneath her. She had just moved in that morning, her old cubicle traded for a corner in the main design studio now that her position was permanent. Spread out on the large drafting table were blueprints for Westbridge's next phase, along with fabric samples and color swatches for upcoming projects. It felt surreal to have her own spot in the heart of L. Price & Co.'s creativity hub. The last few weeks had flown by in a near-constant whirlwind. After finalizing the initial Westbridge designs, Caitlin spent her days meeting contractors, selecting final materials, and refining every detail. The client, Mr. Alden, voiced occasional reservations, but Caitlin navigated each one calmly, demonstrating her thorough research. The overall tone was still positive. Her concept was shaping the penthouse into something extraordinary. But the biggest relief was the shift in her personal life. Thanks to Logan's discreet help, the critical bills for her mother's treatment had been paid. Now, Sharon's medical regimen could continue unimpeded. And although financial challenges remained, Caitlin no longer hovered in fear of losing everything overnight. She was earning a stable salary, gradually setting aside funds to repay the loan, and her mother was showing modest signs of improvement. A glimmer of hope had replaced the once constant dread. Still, a quiet tension threaded through her whenever she and Logan interacted. Their arrangement was private, unmentioned outside a tiny circle. Yet each time they locked eyes, Caitlin felt it, an undercurrent of unspoken emotion in which gratitude, admiration, and a subtle longing all mingled. She'd catch him watching her from across a meeting room with a look that made her heart flutter, or he'd offer a small, private smile in the hallway. She tried to keep things strictly professional, but the lines seemed to blur more with each passing day. By mid-afternoon, Ms. Klein stopped by, handing Caitlin a glossy black invitation. "The company gala is this Saturday evening," she said. "You're officially on the guest list now. It's a chance to mingle with clients, partners, and the team. Dress code is formal." Caitlin glanced at the invitation with a mix of excitement and nerves. It was her first big corporate event, a swirl of potential networking and the inevitable watchful eyes of senior executives. "I'll be there," she promised. "Thanks for letting me know." Ms. Klein nodded. Trevor and I will probably arrive early. You can show up whenever. Don't forget to relax a bit. This is also about celebrating our recent wins." Once Ms. Klein left, Caitlin tucked the invitation into her folder. A pang of anxiety struck her. She owned exactly one formal dress, not brand new by any stretch. Would it suffice in a room full of high-powered executives and wealthy investors? She knew she couldn't afford an extravagant gown, but perhaps she could add a stylish wrap or some inexpensive accessories to freshen it up. Later that day, she sat in on a short meeting with Logan, Ms. Klein, and Trevor regarding the Westbridge construction schedule. The conversation was brisk, focusing on contractor timelines. Caitlin contributed updates on potential suppliers for specialized curved panels. Logan's attention, she noticed, stayed laser-focused on business details. If not for the fleeting warmth in his eyes whenever she spoke, she'd think he saw her as just another staff member. Only once the meeting ended and Ms. Klein and Trevor had exited did Logan linger. He waited until they were alone in the conference room to speak. "I'll see you at the gala, I assume." She nodded, clutching her notebook. "Yes, Ms. Klein gave me the invitation." His gaze rested on her kindly. "Good. It's a tradition here. A chance to celebrate new projects, talk to potential clients. Don't let it intimidate you. You'll do fine." She smiled, nerves fluttering. "I hope so. I only have one formal dress, though, not exactly runway ready." A hint of amusement curved his lips. "You'll look perfect in whatever you choose, Caitlin. I'm sure of it." Heat crept up her cheeks. She thanked him and hurried out, trying not to dwell on how easily a simple compliment from him could set her pulse racing. Saturday arrived, and Caitlin spent much of the afternoon brushing wrinkles from the midnight blue dress that had hung untouched in her closet for ages. It was simple, with a modest neckline and a loose skirt that swayed at her calves. She pinned up her hair in a soft twist, added a pair of understated earrings, and hoped she looked professional, yet elegant. She arrived at the gala venue by taxi, a sleek downtown hotel known for its glittering rooftop ballroom. Stepping into the lobby felt like entering another world. Crisp marble, elaborate floral arrangements, and the murmur of polite conversation greeted her. She followed the signs to the rooftop, heart beating like a drum beneath her dress. The ballroom was a vision of modern luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city skyline glittering under a twilight sky. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over groups of formally dressed guests chatting at high tables or drifting across the polished floor. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne flutes. Soft jazz played from a live trio in one corner. Caitlin paused at the entrance, breathing in the atmosphere. Around the room, she spotted Ms. Klein in a sleek black gown, Trevor in a sharp suit, and a few other Price & Cobra's colleagues she recognized from passing in the hallways. She forced herself to step forward, determined not to hover awkwardly. Damien, wearing a stylish but relaxed suit, caught sight of her and waved her over. "You made it," he said, scanning her dress with a friendly grin. "Nice look. You pull it off well." Relief touched her. "Thanks. This is all so fancy." He laughed. "Just wait until the official speeches start. Or the announcements. Sometimes these things get more formal as the night goes on." Caitlin's stomach flipped. "Announcements?" Damien shrugged. "Sometimes they highlight new promotions, big achievements, or big donors. Who knows? The CEO likes to keep an element of surprise." Her heart jolted at the mention of Logan. She was about to ask more when Ms. Klein approached with a warm smile, complimenting Caitlin on her presentation at Westbridge. They chatted about upcoming design expansions. Gradually, Caitlin relaxed. Sipping a glass of sparkling cider, she avoided champagne, fearing a tipsy slip of the tongue about her personal arrangement. Eventually, the jazz music softened, and the lights dimmed slightly. A hush swept the room, drawing everyone's attention to a small stage near the windows. Logan stepped up to the microphone, looking impeccably polished in a tailored black tux. The crowd offered polite applause. Good evening, everyone, he began, voice resonating in the hush. Welcome to L. Price & Co.'s annual gala, where we celebrate ongoing projects and our incredible team. This year, I'm especially proud of the strides we've made in innovation, pushing design boundaries while upholding the values that got us here. He spoke with calm authority, acknowledging major projects, awarding certain teams with accolades. Caitlin felt the warmth in his words. He truly believed in his company's mission. At one point, Ms. Klein and Trevor were invited to the stage to say a few words about Westbridge's success, mentioning how new talent had contributed significantly. Caitlin's cheeks burned when Ms. Klein briefly referenced our rising junior designer. That alone brought a ripple of quiet applause. She avoided making eye contact with Logan, afraid of what her expression might betray. After the short speeches, the music resumed. Guests dispersed into smaller clusters. Caitlin lingered near a table with a panoramic view, half listening to Damien chat about an upcoming architecture initiative. She swallowed the last of her cider, trying to quell the flutter of nerves. The event was far from over, and she couldn't shake the sense that something else was stirring tonight, some shift or moment she wasn't entirely prepared for. She stepped away for a breath of fresh air, finding a side door that led onto an outdoor terrace. The night air was crisp, the city lights stretching into infinity. Low walls and potted plants framed the quiet area away from the hum of the ballroom. Caitlin drew in a long breath, letting her shoulders ease down. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Logan emerging from the terrace doorway, jacket unbuttoned, hands in his pockets. Something about the way the faint glow caught his features made her heart thud. "Needed a moment of calm?" he asked softly, coming to stand beside her at the terrace wall. She nodded, resting her hands on the smooth stone ledge. "Yes, it's lovely in there, but overwhelming." He chuckled, eyes shifting to the panorama below. "These events can be intense. I sneak out here sometimes myself. You did well tonight. Ms. Klein's mention of you was deserved." Caitlin let the faint music from inside wash over them. "I guess I'm not used to the spotlight, but it feels good to be recognized." Logan's gaze flicked to her, warmth in his expression. "You belong here, and soon, with Westbridge's success, you might draw even more attention." She inhaled, the cool air filling her lungs. "I appreciate all the opportunities you've given me. Sometimes I wonder how to repay you properly beyond the financial arrangement. You've changed my life, Logan." His face gentled, a hint of longing there she hadn't seen so openly before. "You owe me nothing. I only did what anyone with the means should do, help someone who needed it." She swallowed, the city's lights refracting in her eyes. "Still, it means more than you know." They fell into silence, the hum of distant traffic climbing to the terrace in a soft murmur. Caitlin's pulse pounded, sensing that something unspoken hung in the air. It was as though the entire city paused, waiting on them to acknowledge a fragile bond that had formed in half-lit corridors and private conversations. Carefully, Logan placed a hand on the terrace ledge, near hers, but not quite touching. His voice turned hushed. "Caitlin, I realize how delicate this is. I'm your CEO, we're in a professional environment, and I'd never want you to feel pressured. Yet I can't deny that I've come to admire you, your talent, your resilience." Her breath caught. She nodded, emotion swelling in her chest. "I feel it too," she admitted, voice trembling. "It scares me. I don't want to jeopardize my career or yours, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't drawn to you." He exhaled slowly, half a rueful smile forming. "We'd have to be extremely careful if we even considered—" He trailed off, unable to say more, but the implication hovered. "If we consider something beyond these formal lines." Caitlin's heart throbbed. They both knew the risk. Corporate policy often frowned on relationships between executives and subordinates. Colleagues could gossip, or the board might question Logan's judgment. yet the pull between them felt undeniable. After a tense moment, she gave a small, tentative laugh, tears threatening. "I don't know how to navigate this, but I know I can't ignore it." He reached gently for her hand, barely touching her fingers. "We'll figure it out, or at least handle it with honesty. For now, maybe. Let's just be grateful for the chance to share a moment like this." She closed her eyes, letting that slender contact ground her. The terrace lights glowed overhead. A breeze ruffled her hair. The distant sound of clinking glasses and muted laughter drifted from the ballroom. They stayed that way for a quiet eternity. No bold declarations, just an unspoken promise that whatever this was, they would face it together, cautiously, step by step. Finally, Logan withdrew his hand, offering her a gentle smile that spoke volumes. "Shall we go back in?" he asked. "People might wonder where we disappeared to." She let out a breath, still trembling with the gravity of what they'd just acknowledged. "Yes," she whispered, returning his smile. "But thank you for this. For being honest." He nodded, stepping aside so she could lead the way. As they walked back, each footstep felt significant. They were crossing into uncertain terrain, a path lined with professional stakes, personal desire, and a fragile secret that had united them. Neither knew exactly how it would end. But the trust and quiet care they'd built offered hope that, like a well-designed space, there was room for both elegance and complexity. Entering the warm light of the gala again, they separated discreetly, blending into the mingling crowd. Yet Caitlin carried that terrace moment in her heart, blossoming with cautious joy. She had begun this journey desperate for a stable income and a lifeline for her mother. Now she was forging a promising career and stepping into a connection she hadn't seen coming. Whatever twists lay ahead, she knew one thing. She would face them with eyes open, leaning on the belief that fate had brought her and Logan together in an elevator, forging a bond that refused to be just another corporate footnote. They'd found a new horizon in each other, and perhaps that open sky above the city lights was big enough to hold all they dared to dream. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.